And this is Mike Fader, Sirius XM Progress 127. And we have a couple of very interesting guests tonight. I guess no announcements for this hour, but we have a couple of announcements for next hour. Let's get right into it. If you're paying attention, and how could you not, there are a plague of anti-abortion laws being passed by many state legislatures across the country and signed by many governors. And federal judges, for the moment, are turning out to be the heroes in this drama. They are putting a pause button on all these things or saying outright that it's illegal. These are district judges mostly. But we have some questions here. Is it why is this tremendous rash of stuff going on all of a sudden? I mean, it's been going on for a while, obviously, but what accounts for this huge eruption of anti-abortion stuff and basically anti-female legislation that is going on all over the country? And we have a guest tonight, Louise Melling, who is a deputy legal director of the ACLU and director of the ACLU Center for Liberty. And she was a former director of the ACLU Reproductive Freedom Project, women's rights, LGBT rights, and various other things. Louise Melling. Hiya.
Hi there. Thanks for having me.
Sure. So here I pose these statements and sort of rhetorical questions in the beginning here. But let's state the fact. I mean, there is a lot of stuff going on: North Dakota, Texas, North Carolina. Maybe you could discuss sort of what's going on in these states, and then we can get into the whys and everything afterwards.
I've been doing reproductive rights for 20 years, and this has been one of, if not the most dramatic year I've seen. And it's been dramatic just given the number of restrictions that have passed in the states. Like you said, states have been doing this for a long time, and this year is no different in that respect. What's really different is the severity of the restrictions. So you have North Dakota banning abortions as early as 6 weeks. You have Arkansas banning abortions at 12 weeks. You have many states passing regulations to sort of impose different kinds of rules on clinics that can result with the vast majority of clinics closing. In both Wisconsin and Alabama, 60% of clinics were at risk in light of the measures that were passed. Texas, the numbers people are talking about are the clinics could go from 42 to 5, possibly, depending on the final form everything takes. So it's a pretty extraordinary year out there.
Well, how do you explain? You say, I mean, after all, this has been going on for a long time, and these attitudes are very old in this country. But to see this virulence, to see this sort of like a unified attack on women and women's rights, I mean, do you explain this in some way, culturally or politically?
Well, politically, I think one of the things we saw in 2012 was that while the war on women motif sort of, I think, helped to keep Congress more honest about what it was doing vis-a-vis women, the state legislatures had many elections up in 2012, and in a tremendous number of states, it's one party controls the House, the Senate, and the governorship of the legislatures, and I think that's explaining some of the shift. I'm not sure why legislators in these states feel so particularly empowered this year as opposed to other years. I will say, I think it was 2 years ago, there were more restrictions that passed than what we've seen this year. At least by the end of the year, there were more that had passed. But they weren't as dramatic in their impact. They were offensive, they were insulting, they were restrictive, they were all sorts of nefarious things. Mm-hmm. But they weren't, in fact, sort of about to amount to 60% of clinics in the state having to close.
Now, I mean, I haven't taken any kind of measurement of this, and I'm sure some people have. But if you look at these legislatures, and, you could say Republican or Democrat, I suppose, but in most cases it seems to be Republican, and there's explanations for that. But I'm thinking in terms of gender. I wonder if in these states, although it's certainly the case probably in almost all states, that there are that many more men in the legislature than women.
I also can't speak to that. I will say, though, that there were plenty of Republican women speaking out in support of these measures, and certainly the Texas press has been covering, Wendy Davis on the Democratic side, the person who literally stood between, us and the Texas legislature for 12 or 13 hours. Mm-hmm. But there's been a lot of emphasis on a couple of the women who were leading the charge in order to pass the restrictions in Texas.
I talked to a friend who has a radio show in Texas, and he said, according to him, that something like 60 or 70% of the women in Texas, based on a poll, some large poll that a news organization did, disapprove of this anti-abortion and anti-clinic legislation. How, I guess we're talking about politics again, but if so many women, and I bet if you took some kind of poll and it was balanced and fair, to use a certain kind of phrase, you would find out that more women than not disapprove of being treated this way and don't like this kind of activity, but yet here it is.
Well, I've seen one poll out of Texas that said I think it was 80% of the people in the state disapproved of what the legislature was doing.
That's what I heard.
The governor in North Carolina, his ratings have dropped, I think, by 15% or some other factor that's significant in the last month. And one of the things he's about to do, or he may have done as of yesterday, I think he hadn't yet signed an abortion restriction, as well as he's got some other crazy things going. I think one of the factors then is people may disapprove, but the real question for politicians is when does that disapproval translate into action at the polls? And that's what we're yet to see. So disapproval that doesn't, in fact, drive people's votes isn't as significant as disapproval that drives people's votes. But, what I hope is that the politicians are paying attention to the quite visible outcry and outrage this year that we've seen.
Mm-hmm. Do you ascribe this solely to Christian fundamentalism or anything else?
No, I don't. I think there are people who are looking to pass these restrictions who have particular views about abortion that may be based in religion. I also think there are people who maybe aren't fully informed about the impact of their restrictions, and I definitely think, as your initial comments suggested, that when we pass restrictions on abortion, restrictions that we accept about abortion say a lot about what we think about women. There are a lot of restrictions that say, and there was one extended this year for how long a woman is mandated by the state to wait from the time she talks to a doctor to the time she's allowed to have her abortion. And, we say, do they think we don't know? That we can't make a decision and we can't know whether our decision is final? And one of our sort of things that we sometimes say is, do they think we're stupid? Do they think we really can't think? And do they think we don't know what these laws do and what they say about us?
Well, maybe they do think that.
That we're stupid?
Maybe they do. Did you ever hear some of the comments or see some of the people in this Texas state legislature?
Yes, I have heard some of the comments.
Well,
I'm trying to think those are outliers.
I'm not really sure. I'm not really sure what they actually do know. But this thing spills over into something else, though. It's not just abortions we're talking about, although that is the most egregious and symbolic of a lot of things. But it's basically, when you talk about a war on women, that looks like exactly what it is, because what these laws are doing is actually defunding and denying women the right to have health care entirely, right? Poor women.
Oh, the restrictions on abortion are breathtaking, in my view, as a person who's watched this. But it is one of a piece of what's happening in the country.
Right.
So, for example, I think it's now 64 lawsuits in the country filed by different companies, many of them including, manufacturing companies and air conditioning companies and craft stores, challenging the notion that they should have to cover contraception as part of their employee health plans. I really didn't think that contraception would provoke an uproar in the 21st century, but it has. But also, as you say, there's a host of restrictions that pass now in the state legislatures, which are efforts to defund any organization that provides abortions, or we've seen in some states even that refers for abortions, and even if they do that with their own private money. And a lot of the facilities that are providing or referring are places that are providing critical services like breast cancer screenings and pap smears and, basic women's health care.
Well, it's difficult not to make the conclusion when you see these laws being passed, and that would deprive women of preventative, measures against things that could cause tremendous harm, any kind of health care, especially women's health care, obviously. When you see that, you have to think 2 and 2 is 4. These people who pass these laws don't want women to be healthy. Or is it certain kinds of women? Is there any kind of racial component here, or is an attitude towards the poor? What is it?
Well, I would assume that some people have a vision of who gets an abortion that's driving them. I would assume also that whatever that vision is likely erroneous. Statistically, 1 out of 3 women in this country will have an abortion during the course of her lifetime.
And this is across all classes.
Face an unplanned pregnancy at some point.
This is across any kind of class we're talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. So it definitely affects everyone, and it's about women's health, and it's about women's control, and I think at some level it's also saying women who make a choice not to become a parent and instead to do something else like parent the children they already have or finish school, or that somehow we're selfish.
Mm-hmm.
Somehow we're doing the wrong thing. Somehow this is, what can that be? Why else prevent us from having access to end a pregnancy if we're not ready to become a parent?
A lot of these things involve these ultrasounds, the vaginal ultrasounds.
Mm-hmm.
In the same states that pass this, they have on their books what defines rape. And I know the FBI, when they're investigating crimes or charging people or whatever it is, when the Justice Department charges people, there are certain definitions, federal and state-wise, of what rape is. And from what I've read, the laws they're passing that force women, to have to do certain things are the same as the laws on their own books that state what rape is.
There are certain states where they're requiring vaginal ultrasounds, and in some instances it's true. Lots of physicians do transvaginal ultrasounds as part of their practice,
right,
part of performing an abortion, just as a best way to make assessments. And not all of them do, but many of them do. So at least that is within the standard of common care, I think.
Mm-hmm.
What often happens, though, also is that these state laws require that the physicians then either show the woman the ultrasound or describe it to her in detail. And again, this just goes back to not really respecting a woman's autonomy to decide whether or not she wants to see it. This is a woman who's in there to get an abortion.
Well, I guess once again, you have to come back to the same thing again. Somebody seems to be not understanding how, I guess these people assume that women who go for an abortion are doing this like they're getting an ice cream cone. Like it's no big deal, right? Like they're not going through hell having to do it.
Well, it's either that we don't understand what we're doing, or what I also think is happening is that it's an effort to try to shame women into thinking what they're doing is wrong.
Well, clearly.
And really, what other constitutional right is there where we try to discourage its exercise, where the state uses all of its powers to try to tell people it's wrong?
Well, I mean, there's a man now who's the lieutenant governor of Virginia, Ken Cuccinelli. You're familiar with him?
He wants to be governor, right?
Yes, he's running for governor, and he wants to bring back a law that's, 150 years old, that's been outlawed and declared unconstitutional many times. He just wants to forbid anybody, even married couples, from having any other kind of sex except what he calls regular sex.
Uh-huh.
This is when he wants to turn it all the way back to that. So, I don't know. I mean, is there any other country in Europe that has the same attitudes about these things that we do?
Well, I would say that Ireland is not necessarily at the vanguard of the progressive movement when it comes toward women's rights vis-a-vis reproductive health care, right? I mean, Ireland, I think, just legalized abortion in life-saving cases, and I can't remember if they also extended it to rape and incest.
Yeah, but I see them moving on a certain road, But otherwise, I mean, I don't know. It just seems to me that this is kind of a leftover thing. Sometimes, history works in this way, that there are certain entrenched attitudes. And then the mass of society passes beyond those, but those entrenched attitudes still linger,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I understand.
Yeah. So as working for the ACLU, what is it that you're involved in personally, and what is the ACLU doing about all this?
Well, certainly the ACLU, through its members, and, just to all your callers, I thank all of you who are active on the issue and urge anybody who's not active to be active, and active can take many, many different forms, but I think activity, as in expressing your disapproval, both orally and at the ballot, really matters.
Mm-hmm.
So we certainly motivate our members where we can. We work hard with our affiliates. We have affiliates in every state in the country. Work hard with the affiliates to try to defeat measures that obstruct women's access to abortion. And then, as you alluded to, when all else fails, where possible, then we go to court to try to prevent impermissible measures from taking effect so that we can try to continue to preserve women's access to services.
It is heartening, I guess, to see all these judges' opinions in lots of different places. There's a judge in North Dakota, Judge Daniel L. Hovland. I guess you're familiar with him, right? He described this anti-abortion law as in direct contradiction to a litany of United States Supreme Court cases addressing this. And he goes on to say various other things. And he calls it a blatant violation of the constitutional guarantees afforded to all women. In other words, he kind of lost his temper a bit there, you know? And,
well, it is a blatant violation. He might have just spoken the truth about the law.
Well, there was something in the article that implied that he really did even personally find it. You know, I mean, a lot of people are coming down very hard on this kind of stuff.
Well, part of it, I mean, in a state like North Dakota, I believe North Dakota set aside something like $400,000 for the defense of these measures. You know, it's not as if these things are cost-free. When a state passes a law like this that's unconstitutional, they then face the cost, the literal cost of defending it. And then if a party wins in a civil rights case, then they have to pay our attorney's fees. And, you know, it just goes back to the question about, you know, why in the world are legislatures doing this in a time of a tough economy and other issues? But this isn't irrational. This isn't rational. This is about some kind of control.
Yeah, well, there's the oldest control in the books. I mean, just look at human history. But I mean, it's not as if these states are providing. They're saying, well, we are actually trying to keep people from having abortions. We don't think it's right that we think these children should be born, but not at the same moment are they allotting hundreds of millions to support these children, right?
Well, or to support women's health care beforehand, to support, you know, sex ed, to support efforts, easy access to the full range of contraception services, to provide adequate support for women once they have kids. Yeah, it's lacking. And also, you know, to provide robust educational opportunities for women. You
see, now, all the things you just mentioned, and this is all part of what I think is going on, too, is, you know, they are all talking about small government, how the government shouldn't be spending all this money on these private matters or to help people in this way or any way, for all I can tell. And so these things really are encouraging people to actually not avail themselves of services that are often supported by the federal or the state government, correct?
Yes. I mean, one thing that's interesting about the small governments, you do sometimes have libertarians joining forces, you know, with organizations like the ACLU to challenge or oppose restrictions like this on the ground. Their reasoning is that this isn't what the government should be doing.
Well, yeah, I mean, you see the same thing with the NSA. I mean, you see...
yes, exactly.
I mean, that other day, the vote in the House is extraordinary. You know, that combination of libertarians and certain Republicans with Democrats, you know.
Exactly.
Well, all right. You know, obviously, everybody has to keep, you know, electing the people who are going to campaign for the right thing here. And where can people go if there's a specific place? The ACLU has a big website. Is there some special place on it they would go to participate or to learn about these things?
Yes, they can look at our reproductive freedom page. And I confess that I don't have the URL memorized. But yes, they can do that. But one thing I would just say is that I think people don't always pay attention to their state legislative elections and who winds up in their state legislatures. So much of the attention is on things like the governor or members of Congress. But as this year just evidences, a tremendous amount happens in state legislatures, and for lots and lots of people's civil rights, you know, in terms of voting or in terms of LGBT rights and abortion, the state legislatures are the first places that sometimes can make progress, but often can really, you know, obstruct our rights. And so it's incredibly important that people pay attention.
Well, I agree completely. In fact, I think almost every issue you could possibly name in our modern culture, people should concentrate on their town councils, city councils, and state legislatures, because the people at the top, at the federal government, are very comfortable with all their campaign donations from certain other people, from rich people. So, you know, I think you have to start low, and the state legislature is the best place to do it. So I agree completely. Thank you. Louise Melling, who is Deputy Legal Director at the ACLU and Director of the ACLU Center for Liberty. Thank you very much for coming on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Sure. All right. I think what we'll do is take a break, and when we come back, maybe we can talk a little bit more about this. Now, I did want to make a comment which I did earlier at the beginning of last week's show, is that I know that, and I'll say it again. I don't know how many times I have to say it, but I'll say it until it gets boring, until you call up and yell at me. I know that it makes a lot of people nervous to call up a radio station. I know a lot of women don't call up political talk shows, but it's not just politics. We're talking about women's issues here tonight. And we're talking, and besides which, all the issues I'm talking about, the NSA, wars, corporate bribing of politicians, all the various issues we talk about here are not just male and female issues. They affect all of us as citizens equally. It's our tax money, men and women. You work, you have families, we live here. It's all about that. But I know that many more men than women listen to political talk shows, and certainly call political talk shows. Maybe it's something psychological. Men are naturally more aggressive than women. But I'm inviting women to try to participate more in these issues. And I'm not just talking about if it's women's issues, but any issues. Also, if you listen to the program, stop sending me emails telling me how much you like it. No, I don't mean that exactly. You keep sending emails, but back it up by giving me a call, because this is a participatory thing. I mean, I don't want to be part of the whole system where I'm the whole show, where the guest is, and everybody else sits back passively and listens. I really do want to hear from callers. I may argue with you. I may move on to another call after a couple of minutes if I'm stacked up with calls, which would be nice. But still, I appreciate people calling up. It's like voting for your own government in a way. It's, to the extent it can be that way with a corporation like Sirius, please do. So we'll take a break. And when we come back, if you have an interest in talking about abortion, women's rights, why men are doing this, the state legislatures, what's wrong with men anyhow, because it's mostly 90% men in these redneck Republican legislatures, and I'm including Wisconsin and North Dakota, give us a call, 866-997-4748. Okay, let's go to a break. We do? What am I doing? I'm talking. I don't get that. We don't just talk, we do? It's very catchy. Maybe if I figure out what it means, I'll do it. I'll do something. I should do something instead of talking. We don't just talk. We do. Okay. Boom! I just did something. I can't tell you what it is because we're on the radio. So, I don't know. What do you do about this abortion thing? I mean, most women want to have this choice. And certainly they don't want to go through all this crap that they have to go through, this embarrassing, humiliating shit that men basically put them through, and some disturbed women. The women who support these anti-abortion bills, I don't ever want to meet one of these women. I certainly don't want to have to talk to her or have dinner with her or go to a party where she might be. I don't even want to know any women who would actively vote for or propose or campaign for an anti-abortion bill. I mean, the only people I can understand doing this, and I don't agree with them, obviously, and I think they're cracked and should have nothing to do with government, are people who really, truly believe in, the sanctity of a human life inside of a womb. I've heard this argument before, and my attitude about abortions is this. People say, oh, well, they skirt over this issue, or sometimes liberals don't want to talk about this. It is a life that you are deciding to end. If you have an abortion, you're a woman, and you have a child inside you, you have a fetus inside you, you are ending a life. You are ending something that's living, that can be born, that would grow up to be a person. Using a word like killing and murder, I guess it's something, if you're in the right wing, you could throw those words around. But you are ending a life. And I've known women who've gone through abortions, and it is the most heart-wrenching thing that a woman can do. They feel horrible. Some women go into depressions because of what's happening. And I'm talking about women I've known who were very liberal women, as if that tag really means anything. It's a life inside a woman's body, right? And you are choosing to end that. And you have to take responsibility for that choice, because theoretically, if you're thinking about it, and I think most women do think about it, they are deciding that they can't be bringing a child into the world now. They don't want to. They didn't plan on getting pregnant. They made a mistake, or maybe they've encountered some tremendous economic setback, and they can't even afford to have a place or even to feed this new baby. Maybe they just don't want to do it. Maybe they're going through something like this, and men should be involved in this too if they're actually part of the equation. If they're married, if it's the man's possible child too. But it is ending a life. You have to take responsibility for it. You have to know what that means and do it. And I think people should be allowed to make their own choice that way. And on the other hand, should the state be involved in any way at all? Should the state be spending money? Should the federal government and the state of Texas or the state of New York or any state be giving money to clinics that provide abortions? I think, yes, it's the same as providing any kind of health care for women, preventative, breast cancer screening, whatever it is. I think that we, that is, the state is us, right? You and me, our taxpayer money, we owe it to women to provide them with help, just like we owe it to seniors and poor people and to provide an education. Same thing. The men and some of the women in these states, a lot of them southern states, a lot of them fundamentalist states, who talk about this and talk about women as if they were laboratory animals and perform all these experiments on them and treat them like they're children or idiots. I don't understand these people. I don't. If you live in a state, you're listening to me, and you live in a state like Virginia or North Carolina or North Dakota or Texas or Arkansas, who are doing these kinds of things, maybe you can call me and explain what is going on there. Who voted for these people who do these kinds of things? Who are these people? 866-997-4748. Who do we have? Okay, Mike, you're on.
Oh, Mike, hi.
Hey.
It's a pleasure to speak with you.
Yeah.
You have to realize one dynamic about women. I heard the statistic years ago, and I never forgot it. 90% of single women vote Democratic.
Oh, really? Is it really? I didn't realize it was that extreme.
Absolutely correct. Single women, 90% are Democratic, and do your own polling.
Interesting.
But 80% end up Republican.
Say that again. 90%?
I'm sorry, the helicopter overhead. When they're married, 80% end up Republican.
Nah, wait. You're saying that 80% of
they change. They have a whole different political and social outlook when they're single, and when they're married, they end up very conservative and Republican. 80% Republican voting when they're married, 90% voting.
But wait, let me ask you a question because I'm losing. I mean, I'm not very good at logical thinking. But I mean, are you saying it's the same women after they get married?
That's correct.
Oh, okay. So the single women who are overwhelmed.
Political affiliation. I mean, it would be the same principle for a guy when he got married, possibly to change it. Different outlook in life.
I don't know if I mean, I'd have to actually see because I find this unbelievable in a way because.
You want to know another great statistic?
Well, I want to talk about I want to finish talking about this one for a second.
It's part and parcel to the family.
Okay, go ahead.
Words, a man loses an extreme amount of testosterone when his first child is born.
Well, that I read. I read that. Yeah, I read that.
You go.
So what is that?
What's happening is the family situation becomes very conservative, and people's choices and outlooks from when they were single no longer apply. It's almost like they want to be led, and that's a dynamic that you're really not addressing.
But I have to say I really don't understand that because, like, if a woman is married, let's say, and the two of them together, let's say they're teachers and they're making $80,000 a year or $90,000 a year, and they have a kid and maybe they have another kid, but then accidentally a woman gets pregnant. Happens sometimes, right? Even though they didn't want to. They can't if they can't. Well, hold it. I'm not through talking. All right, hold it. I'm not talking. I'm not talking.
Agreeing with you.
Okay. So there's a third kid there, and they don't want to have it. I don't care what their political affiliation is. They have a right to do that. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, but again, you're not realizing the dynamic. These people are not experiencing reality when they're espousing views politically. And you're absolutely correct that a girl who doesn't want an abortion, the minute she's in that position for whatever reason, will have the abortion. But they're all talking in ideal terms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And if you want, I disagree with one thing you said.
Yeah, go ahead.
About the reality of life. I believe that it's upon consciousness, because otherwise, the minute the egg is inseminated, which is real basic Catholicism, you have life inside of you. But I'll give you a great example. And when someone is technically brain dead, you can pull the plug in a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So I always felt that life really began with consciousness. What do you think about that?
I think it's an argument or a discussion or a point of view or philosophy we could talk about. But my point of view is, in response to your point of view, my point of view is that it's all life all the time. And that if you, for instance, if I flick a bug off my windowsill, I'm killing something, right? If I cut part of a plant off because it's sticking into another part of another plant and I have no more room for any plants and I want to have room for the plants, I am cutting off some life. Almost every, like when I eat something got cut down or bashed over the head or reaped somewhere. Something, people live off life. Life is everywhere. Life is everywhere. I think as soon. Well, let me finish what I'm saying. I think as soon as the sperm fertilizes the egg, I think, first of all, you had the sperm is life, the egg is life, they're both alive, and when they fertilize it, they create another kind of life. And if you're going to end that, then you have to know you're doing it. That's all.
Well,
that's what I think.
My one condition that I would say that really has to be applicable is human life. And I don't think that human life begins until consciousness.
Mm-hmm. So consciousness...
life is anything. You're absolutely correct.
So when does consciousness begin?
When you're out of the womb.
Oh, really? So until then, you have no sense of self-consciousness.
Yes. I think it's like about the 6th, 7th month that a baby can even feel any kind of pain in the womb. Mm-hmm. But that could be just a reaction, with nerve cells. There's never been proof that a baby, and we certainly don't have memories of it, that a baby could have any kind of memory or knowledge of what's evolving when they're in the womb.
There was some.
I would say consciousness. There's a great series on the wormhole with Morgan Freeman. It gets into all this stuff. I think it's like 2 or 3 weeks old. They might be doing reruns on the Science Channel, and I think he really nailed it because they basically got to that concept point as well.
Well, you just pick any one of these idiots from Texas who is in Congress or the state legislature. I mean, they seem to turn them out on a special laboratory in Texas. These morons that they elect down there. But one of them, was it Texas or some other southern state? Of course, a southern state stood up somewhere and said that he had evidence, which he waved in the air, some paper he waved in the air, like Senator McCarthy used to. I have evidence right here that fetuses masturbate, which shows that they're human. I personally, you know what? I don't think he should go all the way with this. I have evidence, which I will reveal here for the first time in this show, that hedge fund trading starts in the womb by fetuses at the age of 8 weeks. So that's why you can't have abortions. I mean, really.
It's life. You're absolutely correct. It's life. But human life, I think, is a term that a person who wants to allow abortions needs to fixate on. Human life. And really, that's the point of consciousness, i.e., the hospital. If you have no more brain functions, they can pull the plug.
But it's still life you're pulling the plug on.
Well, you're only pulling the plug on physical life. They don't have the human properties, which is the brain. I mean, let's face it. When they
that's true.
Into a robot, we have immortality.
That's true. That's true. According to every measurement that scientists have right now, as we're speaking, there is no measurable movement detection, electrical activity. There's nothing going on in that brain. You could say that you're pulling the plug because there's nothing going on there. There's no consciousness, no awareness, nothing.
Life.
Well, that's your point of view.
No human life. Human is the brain.
Well,
it always comes down.
So wait a minute.
We're only human because we have a brain.
We're only human because we have a brain?
Sure, you could take our brain and put it in a robot theoretically. And what are we? A cyborg? No, we're still human. We got the brain.
So basically, it's like the Scarecrow in The Wizard of Oz.
Okay.
If he only had a brain.
Yeah.
Okay, I get it.
He's a human.
Okay, so I got some other calls. I should move on.
Hey, it was a great treat talking with you, Mike. Thanks.
Yeah, same here. Okay. Who do we have? Robert from Michigan, you're on.
Wow. I didn't expect to get on.
Oh, well, you're on. You're on.
Well, what I think is that these laws, like the laws about abortion, are essentially fascist laws. Mm-hmm. And I think the state of our government right now is that it wants to take on all the trappings of being a fascist government, and then not calling it itself, and not admitting to itself that it is a fascist government.
So, like, for instance, if the state of Texas passes anti-abortion laws, you're saying they're a fascist state?
Yeah, absolutely. If they would want to secede, I would gladly sign a petition for them to do so.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind that either. It's okay with me. They're not doing much. They take money from my taxes there,
Right.
So let the,
I mean, I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I have had abortions. Myself, I'm a male, so I couldn't be pregnant, so I couldn't myself have an abortion, but I have, how do you put it, caused an abortion? I mean, I made a woman pregnant who had an abortion, and I don't think the government needs to stick its nose in there. I mean, I think that
No, it never is. That's the mistake a lot of these idiots
had to cope with.
It's the mistake. It's that. Look, we're losing your signal. You're drifting off.
I'm sorry.
No. You must be on the road. Yeah. Sometimes it doesn't work out too well. Thanks for calling. Okay. Who do we have? Joy from California. You're on. Go ahead.
Okay. I had an abortion when it was not legal, and it was traumatic, and it was something that I didn't really want to do, but it actually seemed like the most loving thing I could do in that situation. And I noticed at the time that even though it was illegal, wealthy women were able to have abortions.
Oh, sure.
And it really is part of the war against the poor. And, maybe a lot of people can't picture themselves poor yet, but we're all in that process now.
When you had an abortion, were you married?
I was not married.
And what was your economic situation?
I was working on a minimum, I had a minimum wage job. My economic situation wasn't good.
So you couldn't really possibly have afforded to have any kind of life for this child, right?
That's the truth.
Mm-hmm. But still, I
knew that father would have been really harmful, and I really thought I was protected, to not get pregnant, but I still got pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel for every woman that has an abortion, and you're one of the few men that I've ever heard, that I've ever listened to, that understands the anguish that women go through. We know what we're doing. It's very painful, but we feel this is the best choice we can make in our situation.
Well, I wish the men who are in these state legislatures could hear this, but you know what? Women do tell them this, but they don't listen. So it's up to all of us, I think, as citizens to elect people who understand that other people have feelings and rights, rather than these corporate stooges and these fundamentalist nuts who are in all these legislatures. And I'm not saying they're all down south. Some of them are up north, too,
Yes, I think fundamentalist is a key word here, because it's like the people that believe in God and creation, they can't imagine that science can also be true and they can still have their belief system. The ones who don't want to have an abortion, they're not going to be forced to have an abortion. Why do we feel like we have to impose our views on other people?
It's interesting you just mentioned that. When they're forbidding people to have an abortion, it could be just as easily flipped over on the other side, and they may decide who it is who's allowed to have a baby and make people who they don't like to reproduce have an abortion, because it's the flip side of this, isn't it?
Yes.
Fascism is fascism. There are novels written about this, and there are places where this has happened in modern history. They may decide that certain people shouldn't reproduce and pass a state law forbidding them to have children. So, it's the same thing. Anybody who thinks about this other thing, about the anti-abortion laws, should think about where it could lead in the other direction. I should take another call. Thanks for calling, Joy.
Oh, thank you so much.
Okay. Who do we have? Nelson. You're on, Nelson.
Hey, thanks for taking my call. You hit the nail on the head when you call these people fascists. I believe that's what they are. We're going to lose the argument in the nationwide platform, because we keep saying anti-abortion, anti-abortion. It's these people are anti-choice. They're anti-choice, I believe.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so you're saying the choice of words is important, anti-choice. I don't know.
Absolutely, because in Texas, people going around anti-abortion. We're anti-abortion. I'm anti-abortion, but I'm pro-choice. I believe the woman should have a right to choose. It's her body, and I think life starts when the fetus is able to take care of itself, and it doesn't have to be with a umbilical cord.
So after birth.
Absolutely. It is a life, but it isn't a baby until it can sustain itself without the mother. That's what I think. I believe.
I think, there's all kinds of ways of looking at this, and that's your belief. And then we had somebody earlier who says it's consciousness and everything. You could look at it any way you want, but I think we're talking about abortion, and I think it's women who you need to listen to more than anybody else. And I think women understand that when there's something twitching inside there, it's an actual live thing, even if it's only 2 weeks old. And if the women I've known who've had abortions feel terrible, they feel like they've done something almost wrong universally. And it's not a question of wrong or right, but they have done something. They have done something, and people have to take responsibility for it. And for men in state legislatures or governors to assume that women don't understand this is another example of the contempt they have for women.
Oh, yeah, it's a bunch of, they're freaks, these fundamentalists, because they keep saying how Christian and religious they are. Well, yet Christ never talked about abortion or gays. I mean, the things that Christ did talk about, like sheltering the homeless, feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, and feeding the poor or the hungry or whatever it is, they completely block all those very things. It's unbelievable how they're close with pro-life. They're pro-death. They're pro-death penalty. They're pro-getting rid of health care for many people that are just about to get the Medicaid expansion here in Florida and Texas.
I think you're absolutely right. I think the people who portray themselves as the most Christian, these people in the state legislatures, Bush, governors, all these people like this, the people who pass all these laws and make the biggest noise about being Christians are the least Christian people in this country. There are people who are Jews and Buddhists and atheists who are far more Christian than Christians who make a big deal about it.
Bingo, absolutely. I mean, it's unbelievable to me how anybody can go around saying, I mean, come on, let's talk about Jesus Christ spent his time in this whole ministry talking about, advocating for the poor and the hungry and the people that were, the least of these. And yet these people, they counterfeit Christians to me. They go about making a gospel of things that Christ never talked about. It makes me sick.
Last year, Rick Perry, who goes on all the time about being a big Christian, spent $1,680,000 on his security detail, traveling around the country, mostly on his own personal business. He is not here for the poor. In Texas, in the state legislature, where a lot of people claim they're Christians and they're doing this for Christian values, the people, there's a certain section of the state legislature in Texas that are the best seats in the House, and it's all corporations. And in Texas, they call that the owner's box. The owner's box.
Hey, I'm sorry to interrupt. Didn't Mussolini say that corporatism should better be called fascism? And he was the father of fascism. I mean,
yeah, he says the same thing. It's a combination of corporations and a kind of a police state. Sort of what we have here. I got other calls. I should move on. Okay.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Who do we have? Trucker who? Giddy? Giddy. You're on, Giddy.
Hello, Mike.
Yeah, you're on the air.
Hey. So the women that are having abortion, they're the ones that are poor.
Well, I mean, a lot of women have abortions who aren't poor, but go ahead. Do we lose that call? Oh, yeah. Listen, Giddy, you must have gone through some area where we couldn't get your signal. Call back if you want. Charles from Illinois. You're on, Charles.
I'm glad to see you're in touch with your feminine side.
Yeah. But I'm still a real man, so watch yourself what you say.
I mean, a real man who's in touch with his feminine side.
Thank you very much. Okay, go ahead.
Might be a good promo for your show to get more women.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
We're calling about the reason who are these people that are voting for all this stuff, and I would say people probably who Americans for Prosperity, the Tea Party, and the driving force behind it is ALEC, American Legislative Executive Council, who writes the legislation for the state governments. And most people probably don't vote in off-year elections, and these other people are really focused on this stuff.
So the people who are backed by a lot of money, the people who are really focused on it, they will tend to outweigh politically people who just sit back and don't pay attention to their state legislatures, right?
Right. And they're probably the same kind of people who put Hitler in power.
It's a certain passivity and a certain lack of focus. I mean, it's true throughout history that any small group of people who have the money and have the will and the focus can swing other much larger groups of the populace. It's like the history of the human race. I
know, give an example, my daughter is probably too busy going to school for her master's degree and trying to work and make her house payments and everything to pay any attention to politics. And there's probably a lot of people like that who are just busy with their lives that they don't get politically involved.
It's too bad because what they don't understand is that everything in their lives is politically affected.
Right. Of course.
Yeah.
Oh, one more thing.
Yeah.
There's a great interview by a guy who wrote a book called Long Swim Upstream on Writer's Voice with Francesca Rion. His name's Mike Fetter.
Yeah. But I'm so humble.
Good interview.
I am so humble that I have such humility that I was unable to mention that myself. So
well, and plus you were in good company with the interviewer, Francesca Rion, and the other guest on the show was Helen Thomas. So I think you're in pretty good company. Yeah.
Well, since Chuck brought this up, I didn't bring this in. Chuck brought this up. We have. I was interviewed on another by somebody who has a syndicated radio show about the new book I have, A Long Swim Upstream, and she interviews a lot of very interesting people. And there was an interview with Helen Thomas, who just died recently, and the name of the place to go to is called The Writer's Voice. And just put in Google Francesca and The Writer's Voice, and you'll see an interview there with me. It's about 57.
Looking at it right now, it's writersvoice.net.
Oh, okay, writersvoice.net, and you can check out the interview with me. I have to say also, it was a pleasure for me to be interviewed for a change, to be on the other side of the microphone, so I didn't have to do all. Yeah, I didn't have to do all the work this time.
And it was kind of revealing too.
All right, we're going to move on and take another call.
All right.
I mean, you revealing like Timothy Weiner was revealing?
No, not in that way.
Not that way. Okay. All right. So,
kind of way.
Thanks for calling. Okay.
All right.
Bye. What do we have? James, you hung up. Okay, that's it for this hour? Yeah, that's it, right? Okay. So, I mean, this argument about when life begins, we could have this argument, and there's a million ways of looking at this, and there's plenty of legitimate and sincere attitudes about when life begins. So that's up to you to decide when life begins. My point is, in my opinion, there's a show I watch with my wife on TV, and it's all about law and law cases and law courts. It's a pretty good show, actually, called The Good Wife. It's a serial. It's been going on for a couple of years. And they have different kinds of judges, and some of them are idiots, and some of them are brilliant or funny. But they're all kind of quirky and have a tremendous amount of control, these judges. In a courtroom, a judge is like God, right? And there was one woman, every time a lawyer got up and made a statement, and they do that all the time, she would say, "You, in your opinion, right?" The lawyers look at her and they say, "Well, yeah, obviously, if I just said something, it's my opinion." This is very strange. So, but in my opinion, we're all alive all the time. If you cut yourself, and there's blood on a Band-Aid, in that blood there's life. There is life everywhere. There is life in everything that you look at. Even if something looks like it's inanimate, like I'm sitting here in front of the console, and there's plastic buttons, there's juice next to me that I brought in. There's all kinds of stuff. There's my engineer, who's probably alive. There's a million things in here. He's not an inanimate object. Only sometimes. There's a million things here. It's all alive. Everything is alive. Everything you look at, molecules are moving around. They're moving around all the time. Everything that appears to be even solid is moving around. Everything is connected to everything. If you have a cell in your body, one sperm cell, an egg, they are alive. That's life. If you walk on a blade of grass, if you step on a bug, you are harming something. You just have to make you have to come to a kind of an understanding with this. Sometimes you can't live, or often or almost always, you can't live in the world without something else dying. You eat food, something died so you can live. I mean, I believe, I don't want to go off into these whole tenuous philosophical tangents. I think that when somebody has an abortion, that they are choosing to short circuit a form of life. And it's just a question of taking responsibility. And it is nobody else's, purview. It is nobody else's business but the person who's doing that. It's not the government's business. It is not some other man's business to tell you what you should do inside your own body or with your own body. Has to do with sex, has to do with abortions, anything. It's none of their business. It's not the government's business. It's not anybody else's business. It's not a religion's business. It's not anybody's business but your business. All right, that's it for this hour. We have a couple of calls, but we don't have time to take them right now because we're at the end of the hour. After the 6 o'clock news, by the way, this is Mike Fader on Sirius XM Progress 127. They changed the name from Sirius Left, in case you're wondering, to Progress. And we don't just talk here, we do. Now I'm going to do something right now. You hear that? That's me clicking a pen. So we do things on this station now. Just be aware of that. This is not just talk. We'll be back after the 6 o'clock news with Todd Miller, who is writing a book and has written a long article, which is fascinating, about the kind of border surveillance turning into a national, international, sometimes global corporate industry. Border surveillance has become the new Iraq and Afghanistan, especially on the Mexican border. Tens of billions of dollars, 40,000 border control agents. An incredible new way that corporations can grow fat on our tax dollars, declaring war on whole sections of the border, including Canada. So he's going to talk about all this after the 6 o'clock news. So stay tuned. And then at 7 o'clock, if you're still listening, at 7 o'clock Eastern time, or if that's when you can speak up. We will take calls on every subject after the 7 o'clock news. All right, this is Mike Fader on Sirius XM Progress 127. There was a very recent article on one of the essential websites. You ask me where I get information from or I book guests from. There's 4 or 5 solid places to go to, and one is always a place called Tom Dispatch. TOM and then capital D, Dispatch, DISPATCH, Tom Dispatch. And there are frequent articles on there. I think it comes out, maybe it's weekly, usually written by authors or journalists who have done in-depth research, who are experts on certain things. It has to do with war, has to do with, corporate dominance. It has to do with U.S. imperialism. It's usually stuff like that. There was a recent article on entitled, actually, so to give you an idea what it's about, Creating a Military-Industrial-Immigration Complex, How to Turn the U.S.-Mexican Border into a War Zone. And it was written by Todd Miller. And there are things in this article, so you should check this out, Tom Dispatch and Todd Miller. It's astounding information, and you probably might have suspected this, but the depth of it and the width of it is incredible to hear about. And we're going to talk about this tonight. Hiya. You there, Mr. Miller?
Yes. Hello. Hey, thanks for having me.
Okay. Let's tell people who you are a bit here, and then we can go into the article. Todd Miller has researched and written about U.S.-Mexican border issues for more than 10 years now, and he has worked on both sides of the border for Border Links in Tucson, Arizona, and Witness for Peace in, how do you say this?
Oaxaca.
Oh, okay. Oaxaca, Mexico. And he now writes on border and immigration issues for the NACLA NACLA report on the Americas and its blog Border Wars, among other places. So where would people go? What would be a website that would people go to?
They could go to NACLA, NACLA.org.
Okay. And you are working on your first book, Border Patrol Nation, right?
That is correct.
And it's for the open media series of City Lights books. And City Lights, absolutely.
Yep, and there's a webpage for that, too. So if you go to City Lights webpage, you can find the book there. Border Patrol Nation. Exactly.
Okay, and so I'm going to follow this article as it goes along here in a linear way. And it says, in the first paragraph, it says, the first thing I did at the Border Security Expo in Phoenix this March was to climb the brown explosion-resistant tower, 30 feet high and 10 feet wide, directly in the center of a spacious room that holds this annual trade show. Right away, I'm astounded, and I shouldn't be, of course. You know, I'm naive. I'm not a 2-year-old. The Border Security Expo. What on earth is that?
Well, the Border Security Expo, this was the 7th annual Border Security Expo. So it's been going on for, almost for the past 7 years. And it is an expo. It's almost like a mall. It's a gigantic mall with, and this time there were at least 140 vendors. 140 vendors representing different businesses, from large corporations, large, primarily defense contractors like Raytheon or Lockheed Martin, to small startup companies, all who say they have products that would be valuable for the U.S. government's border security mission, and these products. So if you go into this place, it's a as you described, it's a spacious hall. You look up to the ceiling, and there might be an aerostat, and an aerostat is like a surveillance balloon hanging there with cameras hooked on, and is as an example of something you can buy. There might be a plane or even one of the mini drones. They do sell mini drones at this expo, hanging there as well. So it's quite a visual when you walk in. A lot of the booths have sort of kind of like props, plastic props like barbed wire or desert brush, and surrounding a large surveillance tower, and all this stuff you would assume they're trying to peddle to Department of Homeland Security and its border security mission.
I mean, things like, and you say in here, cameras, sensors, armored jeeps, guns, surveillance. So basically what you're talking about here is all these people come here for this expo, and who walks through there who could possibly afford this? It has to be governments, right?
Yeah, governments. And you use the correct, by using the plural form is correct. So not only the U.S. government, but governments from all over the world were present at this expo, but primarily the U.S. government, because everyone knew that immigration. Well, first of all, the U.S. government spends $18 billion per year in its border and immigration enforcement missions. Which, if you think about that, that's astounding, because for border and immigration enforcement, it spends more than all other federal law enforcement agencies combined. So that would be the number one goal. But there are governments from all over the world, and it is a growth industry. Like
for instance, which governments?
Governments from Israel, from Russia, from a number of countries in Africa. I saw Brazil. Any government that's interested in enforcing or using buying technology to be able to enforce their border, their international boundaries more, are show up to the Border Security Expo. So I would imagine that there are even more than there. If I remember correctly, they stated that there was 25 or 30 different countries represented.
Well, when you go into a place like this, first of all, you're accredited journalist? Is that how you get to go there?
Well, how
did you get in there?
It's actually very. What I do is I go to the expo, and there's also it's more difficult than you think, and I had, for example, a friend of mine from Truth Out, publication Truth Out. He tried to go as an accredited journalist, and he was rejected. He was told that he would not be accepted. And so what I do is I just go as a regular. I say that I'm a journalist, but I just go to the expo. And once I'm there, I start talking to people, and then usually I'm able to get into the conference rooms, but I do it in a kind of through the back door sort of way.
So instead of going to a ball game, could I walk over there and buy a ticket?
Yeah, you could.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's not classified. This stuff isn't classified.
No, you all you have to do is register, and you can register online, and you can go to this. And then it's really easy, actually.
Well, my wife is listening. Maybe, honey, we can go there for next vacation.
It would be quite a vacation.
Yeah, it'll be more interesting than going to Maine. Let's try that next year. Okay, so now when you say you have, they have all these demonstrations there, and they showed you, one salesman showed you a mini drone, right?
Yeah.
And what did you say? You asked him what the drone would be used for, and what did he say?
He said to be able to see over something like to be able to see over the next hill.
So this is all sort of military. Are there people there who are basically ex-military or military people involved?
Oh yeah. There's a lot of ex-military, military people. As I said, a lot of defense contractors. So there's a lot of tailoring products that have been used in wars abroad, U.S. wars abroad, for border policing mission.
So as you say in this article here, it says, until you visit the yearly expo, it's easy enough to forget that the U.S. borderlands are today ground zero for the rise, growth, and spread of a domestic surveillance state. And so on the 27th, the Senate passed the Border Security, Economic Opportunity, and Immigration Modernization Act. All sounds very interesting and sometimes very uplifting. Yeah. And so it says, now I'm going to read from your article, along with the claim that it offers a path to citizenship to millions of the undocumented living in the United States with many stringent requirements. It's more than 1,000 pages. It promises to build the largest border policing and surveillance apparatus ever seen in the United States. And Chuck Schumer called it the border surge, which is an interesting phrase, right? Mm-hmm. So inside this bill about immigration is all this money that's going to be allotted to Homeland Security, to Homeland Security, and they're the ones who are in charge, really, of the Border Patrol, right?
Right. Yep.
Okay. Now, do states get involved in this too, like Texas, the state of Texas, state of Arizona, whatever?
It's a federal mission. The border security is a federal mission, so it's a federal government. Those states do get involved, and there are programs through the Homeland Security in which states can get involved, like different operations where Border Patrol will use police, local police, state police for border security missions and stuff like that. And then if you look at Arizona, for example, then you have this other dynamic, or Texas as well, I believe. You have this other dynamic of a state trying to create a state law which has a border security element to it, but that puts it in that creates tension between the actual state and the federal government. So there's both. Now,
in this bill, there are tens of billions of dollars provided for security along the border, and this is not just Mexico too. This expands to Canada too, right?
Yes, and the Caribbean as well.
The Caribbean.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and you say in the last since the first decade after 9/11, $100 billion was already spent. And then, so there's going to be $46 billion more for security?
Right. So that was $100 billion between 2001 and 2011. And then there's as I said, there's $18 billion in immigration border enforcement budget annually. And this will be on top of that. So that'll be an additional $46 billion.
How many border control agents are there now, and how many more are projected?
So right now there's 21,000 Border Patrol agents, and approximately 18,500 on the southern border, and the rest on the northern border, like 2,300 or so, and the Caribbean as well. And it will basically double the ranks of the Border Patrol, which is significant. It'll increase the Border Patrol ranks by 19,000 agents, and if you think about it, and I mentioned this in the article, that is dramatic because Border Patrol grew from 0 in 1924 when it was founded to 4,000 in 1994, and then now we're talking almost 40,000 agents by 2000, I think 16 or so, which is huge.
And obviously, since you were talking about what's available at this expo, they have personnel carriers. They have. Can you describe some of the equipment these people have?
Oh, they have all kinds. They already have all kinds of equipment, different like thermal imaging cameras. They have like armored jeeps. They already have the surveillance balloons. They have surveillance towers, these with increasingly sophisticated technology. They have the drones, the Predator Bs. They have a fleet of 10 of those right now, 8 of which patrol the southern border and 2 of which patrol the northern border. The drones. The one interesting thing is that is exemplary to the transfer of the battlefield to the border is the use of the Vader system by Northrop Grumman.
Vader, Vader?
Exactly.
Like Darth Vader?
Like Darth Vader. Okay. It's not the Skywalker system, it's the Vader system.
Okay.
and it's basically manhunting radar. It was used in and this is how they describe it: manhunting radar. It was used in Afghanistan to try to locate roadside bombers, and now there's systems already used on the Predator B drones on the U.S.-Mexico border that are used to detect unauthorized border crossers.
Are some of the drones armed with non-lethal weapons or even lethal weapons?
No, they are not, but there was an interesting article that just came out in which the Border Patrol is pushing for these drones to be armed with non-lethal weapons.
What is it? What is a non-lethal weapon?
So a non-lethal weapon is basically like whenever I think of a non-lethal weapon, the first thing that comes to mind is a rubber bullet.
Oh, I see.
Right. So it's not supposedly, even though I know there's cases like or what is a taser?
Mm-hmm.
A taser. Supposedly it's not going to kill you, but it's gonna stop you. It's gonna and what they want now as far as equipping the Border Patrol equipping drones with non-lethal weapons, I'm not sure exactly which types of non-lethal weapons they are anticipating to use. Mm-hmm. But what they want to do is be able to immobilize what they call points of interest or targets of interest. I'm sorry. And so
a target of interest is a human being we're talking about.
That's what I interpret that to mean.
Okay. So and then in addition to all of this, and we're going to go along, there's more in this article here. If you just tuned in, we're talking to Todd Miller, who has done research and involved himself very seriously about border issues, Mexican border issues, for more than 10 years. And the new book is out? Is it published already?
No, it's forthcoming. It'll be published in February 2014.
Okay, so we'll have you on then, and it's called Border Patrol Nation. So, and this will be published by City Lights Books. So here's something I wanted to read. In addition to all this stuff on the border and all the weapons and everything hovering in the air and on the ground, there are checkpoints. And it says here, normally located 20 to 50 miles from the international boundary, they serve as a second layer of border enforcement. Stopped at one of them, you will be interrogated by armed agents in green, most likely with drug-sniffing dogs. If you are near the international divide, it's hard to avoid such checkpoints where you will be asked about your citizenship and much more if anything you say or do, simply the way you look, raises questions. And let me read this following paragraph and then you can comment. Even outside of the checkpoints, agents of the Department of Homeland Security can pull you over for any reason, without probable cause or warrant, and do what is called a routine search. A U.S. Border Patrol agent told journalist Margaret Reagan within 100 miles of the international divide that, quote, there's an asterisk on the Constitution. Now, let me see if I really understand that. Let's say I'm driving along 25 miles from the border, from Mexican border in Texas, right? Yep. And there's a checkpoint located somewhere. I presume it's not on a major road. This must be, is it out in the desert somewhere or what?
Both. It's on both. It would be any, in fact, I can't think of one place now. If you're coming up from Mexico or you're at the actual border and you cross the international boundary and you're heading north, and say you cross the border in Texas and you're heading north to San Antonio, no matter what road you go on, you will go through a checkpoint, and it could be 25 miles, it could be 50 miles, it could even be as much as 100 miles, but usually they're 25 to 50 miles away from the border.
What if I'm driving around, which I did once actually, what if I'm driving around, southern Texas within 50 or 100 miles or 25 or 50 miles of the border, and I'm just driving around because it's interesting to me or I want to visit somebody or anything. I'm an American citizen, right?
Right.
Can they stop me and put me through all this?
Yep. They
really?
Can stop you.
Really?
Yeah. What normally will happen is how when a police officer stops you, they'll ask you for your license and registration. Right. When a Border Patrol agent stops you, the first thing they'll ask is your citizenship. So you don't have.
How are you supposed to prove that?
Well, in the example that you're bringing up, as if you are driving around as a U.S. citizen, you don't have to carry around any sort of proof of your citizenship. So you say I'm a U.S. citizen, and if they believe you, well, then they'll let you go.
And what if they don't believe me?
If they don't believe you, then they can detain you and I mean, they probably could even bring you into the station, and if you raise their suspicions, because they also have it's they'll ask the citizenship, but they have a national security mission. They have a drug interdiction mission.
So if I was to say something like, "Am I a citizen?" Who are you to ask me that? That's it for me, right?
Yeah. There's a lot of it's interesting that you're bringing this up, because there's this YouTube campaign going on right now where people are actually challenging the Border Patrol in checkpoints. They're going to the Border Patrol checkpoints, and they are not, like, the agent will ask them their citizenship, and they won't respond. Or they'll say, I don't have to respond to that. Or what business is it of yours, what my citizenship is. And it's created, and they're taping it. And I think in all the different videos that I've seen, they have actually let the people go. But that they could detain you for not answering. It's within your rights not to answer their question.
Right. You know, I remember, and we talked about this on the air, it was about 4 or 5 months ago or something like that. There was an incident, and you must be familiar with this, I guess, near the Canadian border. There was a train going parallel to the border in the United States, but very close to the border.
Uh-huh.
And some of these agents boarded the train and started questioning people at random.
Yep.
These were American. They just questioned American citizens and asked them to produce papers and who they were and where they were going inside the United States.
Yep. That was, and I believe still is, a regular occurrence. And we're talking about a train, like an Amtrak train,
right.
going from New York City to Buffalo or Chicago.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to Rochester, and all of a sudden there's armed agents in green uniforms coming on the train and asking everyone their citizenship.
Now, this is in the name of various things. One is, of course, the first thing Homeland Security is going to do, hence the name Homeland Security.
Right.
And the idea of using the word homeland is, I don't even want to get into that.
Yeah,
I mean,
it's a loaded word. Right?
The motherland, the fatherland, homeland, But it's to protect us, right? I mean, I'm not going to be like devil's advocate, but I mean, they're there to protect us from terrorists sneaking across the border who might set off dirty bombs or poison reservoirs or something. Shouldn't we be happy they're doing it?
Well, that's definitely that's their number one priority. That's their mission statement.
Yeah.
So
shouldn't I feel good as an American citizen that they're doing that?
Well, that's a good question.
I'm just asking.
Yeah. So you assume that with that you assume that they're stopping. If somebody had some sort of motive to do such a thing, like poison, like get into the country, and for example, when you think about the common thing to bring up is the September 11th attacks.
Yeah.
And not one of the people involved in the September 11th attacks came over a border. I believe they were all people that came in on visas. But
they could come across a border, right? They could walk right across the Canadian border, right?
Right. I mean, the Canadian border is 4,000 miles.
Mm-hmm.
It's possible that people could come across the border with intentions to harm the country in some sort of way. That's definitely a possibility.
So
but
I
is
would
it likely. Like
yeah.
How many? So if you look at the archives, how many quote unquote terrorists have been caught crossing the border, and you get mixed reports, but they're always between 0 and 1 or 2.
So now we're talking about the same exact argument here of how much freedom do you want to give up, as opposed to how much security do you want, even if they could prove that they are providing security. It's the same argument with the NSA spying, right?
Yeah, I guess so, but then you get into this whole discussion of what's security. Like one interesting thing is the city of Detroit. Right now, the city of Detroit, which has been cutting its basic services for how long, it just declared bankruptcy, and yet in the city of Detroit, you have a lot more Border Patrol agents and a lot more Homeland Security presence in the post 9/11 era. So you have this whole idea of, we need to build up our security and guard our borders. Yet you have this city that's completely falling apart, and people are losing their sense of security, just falling into poverty and not having basic services, and watching their city declare bankruptcy. So,
well, that's the same thing. I mean, the government can't fund because of the sequester, and you mentioned this in your article. I mean, the government of the United States, our government, my government, your government, can't find money to pay for Meals on Wheels, but they could find money to buy drones to fly over the border.
Right. So
okay. Okay.
I think that's a really important thing to consider. $46 billion, that's a lot of money. And with, all kinds of problems like, how funding Meals on Wheels, that might help somebody, like give somebody more security instead of funding something like that, we're funding.
Let me read something here, and this is more in the nature of a devil's advocate thing. I mean, but it's important to when you state these positions, it's important to explain why you're saying it and what the reasons are. Mm-hmm. Here, I'll quote from here. Although unauthorized border crossings have slowed down in recent years, tens of thousands continue to cross into the United States annually from Mexico and Central America. And you explain why here, and you can do that in your answer. But if I read here that tens of thousands are crossing into the United States unauthorized annually, every year from Mexico and Central America, might I not say, as a resident of the state of Texas or Arizona or California, where jobs are hard to get, where it's difficult to get into a hospital because it's so crowded or schools are so crowded, might I not say, hey, you know what? Why don't we stop all these people from pouring across the border when it's hard enough for our own citizens to have a decent life? And I'm glad there's a border patrol. I'm just telling you what a lot of people would say. Now, what's your answer to that?
Yeah, and in fact, that's what a lot of people. That's one of the arguments that people have made. That that there's scarce jobs as is, but there's not enough services for all of us, and yet here come we have to. But it goes into a number of different.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
First of all, one thing that and this is an economic critique, but it has to do with comprehensive immigration reform and how it's framed right now, and it's. The way, in my opinion, it's not framed in a comprehensive way because it doesn't address the reasons why people are coming in the first place. Mm-hmm. And when you look at the reasons why people are coming in the first place, for example, Mexicans, you see a great upsurge of immigration coming from Mexico to the United States in the wake of the North American Free Trade Agreement in 1994, and that sort of economic model.
Well, but amplify on that. What specifically about the NAFTA thing?
So with NAFTA,
what happened?
With NAFTA, for example, small farmers who were able to have were able to have good prices for their corn. Mm-hmm. They all of a sudden they lost their subsidies, and at the same time they started competing with big corporations coming from the United States like Cargill or Archer Daniels Midland, mm-hmm. and who could sell their corn at prices that undercut the small farmer in Mexico. And so all of a sudden you have the estimates vary, but over 2 million small farmers who are declaring bankruptcy, who no longer can make it. Mm-hmm. And so when you lose your job, what do? You look for where a job can be found. And of course, in the United States, there's all kinds of jobs for undocumented labor.
Jobs like Rick Perry has, like $3 an hour or whatever it is. Right.
Right. Yeah. The jobs, now many say, jobs that like farm work, and if you go, almost everything we eat, in many cases is picked by undocumented immigrant labor. Mm-hmm. The jobs that people say that like jobs in Alabama, mm-hmm. When the restrictionist law was passed in Alabama, you had the exodus of undocumented labor leaving Alabama, and all of a sudden there was nobody around who were going to go into the fields and pick the crops, and then the people that lived in Alabama didn't want to do it for the low prices for the low, so that you have this whole dynamic of undocumented labor doing labor that U.S. citizens are not doing.
So on the macro, on the larger basis, you have to look at the reasons. You say, per person, you have to look at the reasons why all these people would flood across the border. It's not because they love the United States or they want to be here, their whole lives, or they dreamed about coming here. They're basically, you're saying, are forced to come here.
Yep, it's definitely economic reasons. It's not. It's what happens to anyone when they lose their job.
Well,
if you lose their job, you think of what you do next. You think about your family. You think about sustaining your family, and these decisions that people make to come are not easy decisions. People are leaving their communities. They're leaving the places they love. They leave their families. They leave the place where they speak the language, and they go on this journey. And this journey is not easy. And in many cases, you have to walk through a desert for a long period of time, which could be possibly deadly. It's not an easy decision for people to make, and it comes down to economics in most senses. I mean, there's variations of that, but in most cases.
So in Mexico and some other places, you're saying there absolutely are no other jobs. There's no government programs. You would just basically starve if you didn't make it all the way up here and try to find work.
Well, I mean, there are, but they get cut. There's jobs, but there's less jobs. So there's government programs, but under the sort of NAFTA regime, like the economic regime under NAFTA, it calls to cut government programs. So the government programs that would help sustain a local economy they're constantly getting cut, and people are left with almost forced to move or to look for employment. Sometimes it's not necessarily in the United States. Like somebody in the south of Mexico there might be an agricultural job in the north of Mexico. So you see a lot of southern to northern migration. You see like Guatemalans coming into southern Mexico and working in the fields in southern Mexico. You have this kind of Nicaraguans going to Costa Rica to work in different places there. But in a lot of cases, people are going to come to the United States. If you think about it, one good way to just underscore this is the minimum wage in Mexico is around $5 to $6 per day. It's not per hour, per day. So in many cases, they can come to the United States and make easily that in 1 hour, even if it's under the minimum wage. They're still making 10 times the amount they're going to make in Mexico in a day in the United States.
Let me reintroduce you here. We're talking with Todd Miller, and he has researched and written about U.S.-Mexican border issues for more than 10 years. Can you stick around for a little bit, because there's more to this article I want people to hear?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so we're going to take a break now, and it's about 3 minutes long, and when we come back, we'll resume talking, and I want to get into the whole idea of business lobbying and who's getting rich off all this militarization of the border, and who's it costing money. Okay? Okay, we'll be right back. This is Mike Fader, Sirius XM Progress 127, and here we go on a break. Yeah, all these people on this promo for Sirius Progress. What about me? I'm here. They didn't ask me. All right. But do I care? All right. So we're back with Todd Miller. And here's something. It's called a new section of the article. And this is an article that was on Tom Dispatch. And I mentioned earlier, you should go and check this article out. Todd Miller, and just put in Todd Miller and Border and Tom Dispatch, and you'll get this article. You call it The Laboratory. And it says here, In early March, DRS Technologies set up its integrated fixed tower technology at the University of Arizona's Science and Technology Park just south of Tucson. First of all, who is DRS Technology, and what kind of representative corporation are they? I mean, they represent other kinds of corporations. And what are they doing at the University of Arizona?
Good, very good questions. DRS Technologies, I don't know much about them. I know they're a defense contractor, that they have contracts with the U.S. military abroad, and that they one of their specialties is surveillance equipment, and they've actually got into the kind of border security market, if you want to call it that. They've been in it for about 10 to 15 years, I believe, in the Middle East. In places like Egypt and Jordan, I believe it has what they were setting up at the University of Arizona as a testing to test their integrated tower system. They've deployed in these other places for border or perimeter surveillance.
Why at the University of Arizona? Why not somewhere else? What's at the University of Arizona, or what does the university get out of it?
So the University of Arizona is an interesting case study in what is happening in the border security realm in the United States. The University of Arizona, first of all, it has a grant that it gets from the Department of Homeland Security for this program. It has what is called a Center of Excellence, and Center of Excellence.
Sorry,
yeah, it's called that.
Okay.
In border security, and there's like 11 centers, DHS, Department of Homeland Security centers of excellence throughout the country. So there's a bit of an Orwellian.
I was just going to say, took the words right out of my mouth. Where is Orwell now?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Centers of Excellence, terrific. Go ahead.
Yeah. So this grant. So the University of Arizona is the research lead in what the development of border policing technology. That's one aspect of it. The other aspect of it is it has a science and technology park, and the science and technology park has a border security program aspect to it, and it is trying to develop what, according to its CEO, the tech park CEO, what it wants to do is develop the first cluster of border security companies in the United States, and they already have 57 different companies kind of identified, and these companies are like DRS Technologies, companies interested in either creating or tailoring their products for a border security purpose, and so the dream is because of the University of Arizona's proximity to the international boundary, and of course, the tech park is like 60 miles to the north of the U.S. boundary. They are seeing it as an ideal testing place within the park, within the actual science and technology park, where they have different props they can set up. Like when DRS Technology set up its surveillance, they actually set up a tower, and then they hooked up their cameras to the tower, and then they had this operational control room, and the media sat in the control room, and you watched four IT guys, looking at a video camera as these two guys coming towards each other 4 miles away in the desert, right? But on an elevated railroad spur where they were apparently passing a bag full of drugs. So that was the mock scenario that was shown to the media at that time. But there's all kinds of different things that they can do at this tech park, like such as set up the sensors, like implanted sensors in the ground, where to test those things out, but also its proximity to the border means that some of this technology can actually be deployed and tested in the borderlands, which makes the borderlands itself a laboratory.
Is the University of Arizona a public or a private school, do you know?
It's a public school.
So it's a public school, so it's funded in part by the state of Arizona, tax money from people from Arizona.
Right, yep.
Oh, okay. So let me ask you this question. Because there's more to this than I want to talk about. Why is it that the government of the United States is fooling around with all this stuff? Why don't they just mine the entire border every 5 feet?
That's a good question.
Don't tell me that nobody's thought about this. There's a center of excellence for you.
Yeah, I don't know. You certainly have. I've heard different scenarios brought up by different people of and mining the border. I've heard that one before.
Have you really? I'm sure you haven't. Somebody's going to attempt to make money out of it. Here's one more thing, and it's an important thing, so I want to read this too. For almost a decade, the Department of Homeland Security has been attempting to build a virtual wall along the border, not a physical barrier, but a high-tech surveillance masterpiece, a complex web of technology, radar, unattended ground sensors, and camera systems meant to detect anyone crossing the border anywhere. And the last attempt to install such an experimental system along part of the border was 2006. Then the Department of Homeland Security awarded Boeing Corporation a multi-billion-dollar contract to develop such a wall known as SBINet, and it didn't work, right?
No, it didn't. Well,
so is it still in the works or what?
So the actual tower, if you go to southern Arizona, you'll see that was the pilot area for the Boeing the SBI net experiment, and you'll see the towers out there, and they're actually active towers that are working. But that was the actual. There's problems with the technology. It was having trouble with. If you go to southern Arizona, it's not a flat desert. It's very rugged. There's lots of mountains. It's not easy to, they were having trouble with that sort of rugged terrain. And also, so I hear that the sensor systems were going off and saying that humans were setting off the sensors, but really it would be an animal, a cow maybe. So there was trouble like distinguishing what was setting off the sensors.
Were these illegal cows or the U.S. citizen cows?
Probably U.S. citizens,
okay.
but there is cattle that goes back and forth across the border.
I'm not trying to be facetious. You understand that sometimes this approaches the point of such absurdity that you get. Yeah. You know what I'm saying. So let me move along here because actually we're sort of running out of time. But and the whole thing is so astounding to me. One thing you mentioned here, though, that's interesting is you're talking about tens of billions of dollars getting poured into these companies, and these companies either are located down in this area or they're testing things down there or they're employing things down there. So really, it could provide possibly a lot of jobs for economically depressed areas down there. Isn't that a good thing?
Yeah, I mean, that's what, for example, the University of Arizona Tech Park is saying this is about creating jobs in places that need jobs, and that's a sort of angle. And how does that not sound good? If we're bringing in new businesses, we're bringing in new technologies that are going to need to be developed, and we're going to need employees, and we're going to create jobs. But that you also have to look at that. And I mean, when you think about when you get to the idea of an industrial complex. Mm-hmm. The whole idea is that that an industrial complex does create jobs, so it then takes a hold and it needs to stay put. Like, for example, for a job to be created in this realm, then you're going to need the constant threat in place.
Just like warfare.
You have to create a perennial, perpetual enemy to constantly be creating more and more surveillance technology to be able to defend yourself from this enemy,
in other words,
real or imagined.
So it's the same with this constant Defense Department weapons. We're at war with the whole world kind of thing. I mean, it's a vicious cycle that goes on forever. I mean, if you ended war, or if you figured out a benevolent way to end all these refugees coming across the border, then you would be putting all these people out of business. So they have to keep having. It's almost as if they would get to the point where they themselves, for a cheap price, would fund these people to come across the border to provide, for their companies to be constantly hired to keep them from doing it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that would create an interesting dynamic for sure.
So you spoke to the head of one of these companies, a man named Bruce Wright. And of course, as you said earlier, and you write about in your article, it's not just the American border, it's Palestinian, Israeli, German, Polish, Syrian, Israeli, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And so this whole idea of building up borders and militarizing the borders and making them impregnable and even dangerous places to try to cross. This guy said, here's the CEO, his name is Bruce Wright, there's a huge market for this technology worldwide because borders exist everywhere. And he goes on, names all the borders like I just did. And so this provides a huge, hundreds of billions of dollars and employs hundreds of thousands of, Army, recruits and Border Patrol agents. It's a sad direction for the human race to be going in, right? I mean, I think of Robert Frost. You know what I mean?
Good fences make good neighbors.
Yeah. I mean, I'm being ironic, right? I mean, so are we going in the other direction? Are we actually dividing the whole world up again into isolated places?
That's what it kind of seems like. Like, for example, if you look at the U.S.-Mexico border, you're putting a very strict, highly enforced dividing line between a great economic inequality. And if you look at other borders, like if you look at the European Union, the different countries that border or have proximity to Africa or have strict border enforcement regimes to the south, like the south of Spain. Mm-hmm. If you look at where the borders are more highly enforced, it always has this idea of people that are coming for economic reasons, like it's almost coming up against this militarized border wall.
So it's almost as if internally, if you look at these gated communities where the wealthy who are getting wealthier all the time, basically have walled communities to guard against the rest of us, right?
Yeah, that's a decent metaphor for it's. Yeah, there's similarities.
Well, at the end of the article here, it says, in a world where basic services are being cut, an emerging policing apparatus in the borderlands is flourishing. As Mattia Kramer and Chris Hellman reported at Tom Dispatch in February, since September 11, 2001, the United States has spent $791 billion on Homeland Security alone, an inflation-adjusted $300 billion more than the cost of the entire New Deal. I don't know. It sounds like we're all going... Not we all, but they are. I think of the government as a separate entity from we. Right? It's going in the wrong direction. So in the last couple of minutes here, Mr. Miller, can you suggest anything that we all can do about this behemoth that's crunching everything?
Yeah, that's well, as far as it's interesting to me that the lack of of course there is dialogue, but yeah, that's those sort of stats that you just read, comparing like how much money we're actually putting into this idea of Homeland Security, whereas, in comparison to the New Deal or like looking at that compared to other essential services that are being cut. Look at education. In Tucson, Arizona, we're closing down schools. And we're taking away schools, but we're having ever more border patrol agents. So it's kind of obvious there. But that kind of, this is like looking at what our country is becoming and how can why are we spending all this money? Like you brought it up earlier when wouldn't we be protecting us from different you brought it up as a devil's advocate point from. Terrorists coming across the border and doing harm to the country. But if you look at it, there haven't been, I don't think there has been any terrorists, anybody that has been involved in a terrorist organization that has been caught coming across the border. Yet at the same time, so we're spending in this bill, you have $46 billion that's going to go to the same mission. And at the same time, where can that $46 billion be spent better? There's many places where we can use that money to make a better and more prosperous and healthy and happy country. Mm-hmm. And where, can't we identify those places and to provide real security for people?
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, so we've stated the case, and I guess it's always goes back to the same thing. People have to be more educated to what's really going on, and we try to do that here, but you don't see it happening too much elsewhere. But people have to stay educated, and in some cases, then I thank God for the net, where this kind of thing is available, where this information is available. After all, I got this article on the internet. I wouldn't have got it on any major media anywhere, So people have to stay educated. They have to make intelligent choices about who they vote for, to the extent that makes any difference anymore. And maybe they actually have to get out there on the street or out there in wherever it is. And like you say, go over to these checkpoints on purpose and stand in these people's faces and say, this is not Nazi Germany. This is the United States. Who do you think you are?
Right.
That's what people need to do. I did a little pitch for activism here. Anyhow, Todd Miller and... check out, why don't you tell people where they can check out what the book is going to be like, and they can sort of keep clued in on when the book's going to come out?
Sure. It's so the book is called Border Patrol Nation, and there's actually a page for it on City Lights, you can Google City Lights. Mm-hmm. If you Google City Lights Border Patrol Nation, the book will show up, but you can go to their webpage. I think it's citylights.org, but it might be citylights.com. So,
all right. Well, I don't, I get, review copies from all kinds of places all the time, but if there's any way to put me on a list, so that, you know what I mean? So I received that book and you can come on. And all right. Thank you.
That would be great.
Thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Okay. That's Todd Miller. And, what are we doing in this country? So we could spend $1 trillion protecting ourselves, and then what's inside the country that's being protected? People who are vastly ignorant because we have no teachers, people who are starving and have no place to live because we don't spend money on food programs or on health programs, or taking money from banks that stole it from us and propping up people who have to pay their mortgages. What kind of culture, what kind of society are we living in here in this country that we're spending so much money to protect? It's turning into a gigantic steel egg, which inside has nothing in it anymore, or that has turned rotten. So increasingly, as the outside of this egg is reinforced with steel and weapons, the inside has nothing but rot. I mean, our values are totally upside down. When I say our values, I'm not including the people who are listening to me right now, and I'm not including myself. And once again, it just brings up to me the tremendous Grand Canyon gap between what Americans who are decent and want to help each other and help other people feel in their normal everyday lives and what they do, and the people who are representing them theoretically in government. It's a mystery to me. It's an utter mystery to me. If we don't take control of our own government and we continue to be so passive and less than 50% of the electorate turns out for a national election, I guess we get the government we deserve. I guess so. I mean, it's not up to me. It's up to another generation coming up. So all I can do is get on here and talk about it. Although on Serious Progress, we're supposed to do something. So I'll do something right now. I'll get off. And this is Mike Fader, Sirius XM Progress 127. For those of you who don't know what Progress is, shame on you. No, actually, Sirius left, which this has been for a long time, turned into Sirius Progress about a week ago. So get hip. This is Sirius Progress 127 right now. What I'd like you to do, anybody who's listening to me, all the people listening to me, is go to my website. It's a way that you can get on a mailing list that I have, and I write frequent mailings, essays about various things, culture, tell personal stories, talk about politics, all kinds of stuff. Observations that I made. I'm taking a lot of really interesting, even what I would call artistic photos, all kinds of stuff I do. Also, if you go to my website, you can find out what else I do on the radio. I'm very active doing radio shows. You can find out books that I've written, including you get information on my latest book and all that. And you can contact me through, if you want to get in touch with me to tell me something that you disagree with that you heard on the station or something you agree with, or tell me anything that you want to. I'm always interested in people's personal stories too. That's the way to do it. It's called FaderFiles.com, FederFiles.com, FaderFiles.com. And go there and sign up for my mailing list, and it's a way to contact me and find out everything else that's going on that I do, most of which I think, at least, is pretty interesting. So what do we have here now? First thing I want to do here, this is the personal hour, where I ask people to call up and express an opinion. Now, you heard talk about two different major important issues so far on this station tonight, on this show tonight. We're talking about abortion and the attack by men, almost exclusively, and some deluded women, in mostly Republicans, in state legislatures all over the country. Well, everybody's always yelling and screaming about Congress and the Democrats and Republicans and House leaders and Senate majority leaders and the president. Where the real action is happening that affects us on our daily lives in a much more acute and sometimes very difficult way is state legislatures. And a lot of them are controlled by a lot of men mostly, and some women who do not have our interests at heart. But we can influence those elections far more than we could ever influence the bought and paid for prostitutes in the White House and in Congress. right? So we have almost no control over who we elect to be in Congress or to be a senator, rather, or in the House of Representatives or a senator, or who gets to be president. It's a set-up deal. There's two parties. There's two corporate parties. They work for the general corporate culture in this country, the Democrats and the Republicans. There's a handful of people in Congress, one or two senators, and maybe 20 or 30, maybe 5% of the House of Representatives that are decent people and that are representing us, and I mean all of us as decent people representing us the right way. Alan Grayson is one of them, Elizabeth Warren in the Senate, and there's a bunch of other people I can mention. Maybe 5% of the 600 odd people who were there are not corporate stooges or fools or arrogant bastards. Okay? So what you got to concentrate on is the state legislatures. And people ignore that. They tend to ignore that. But this is where all these awful laws are being passed against women. So we had that issue. Second issue is we were talking about Homeland Security, which has become almost out of control. It's almost like a national corporate police that spends trillions of our dollars over the last 10 years on things that we may not need at all, taking away our liberties. I mean, the fact that people who are employed by the United States government, Homeland Security, who are dressed in military fatigues, carrying weapons, can board a train running inside New York State, carrying passengers who are mostly American citizens. They can board that train and ask you who you are, where you're going, and what you're doing. It's resonant of Russia under the Soviets and Germany under the Nazis and China, where any authority can question you at any time and detain you without a warrant or just because you look funny and they don't like how you look. It is, to put it briefly, a police state that we have fallen into. And our taxes, like, I don't know how much money you pay in tax, right? Maybe $3,000 a year or $30,000 a year, whatever you pay in tax, about 2/3 of that money goes towards enriching corporations which feast off death and fear and misery. 2/3 of your money goes to war. It goes to patrolling the borders. It goes to corporations. The National Security Administration, is that what it's called? Is it administration? National Security. The NSA is spying on you. They are tapping your phone, everybody's phone, everybody. They're tapping your phone. They're reading your emails, despite whatever it is they claim they're not doing. They're doing those things with your tax money that you work hard and they take out of your check. You're paying them to spy on you. And the telephone companies that are spying on you charge the government to spy on you. So you're getting shafted from both directions at one time. If it was pornography, there's a certain name for it, right? I mean, this is what is happening. So most of our tax money is going to pay bribes, to enrich people in the Senate and in the House of Representatives, who are already rich from corporations. They're being paid directly, indirectly through Homeland Security, National Security Administration, the Defense Department, going directly to enrich huge corporations which are in the business of making weapons and spying on people and killing people. This is what we've come to here. All right, so that's the second subject we discussed. And if you have anything to say about any of this, please give us a call, 866-997-4748, 866-997-4748. I have a couple of other issues that I might want to bring up here tonight too, but we'll see how we do with these first two issues. Oh, wait a minute. There's one thing that's part of what I was just saying, and then we'll go straight. We have a couple of calls. We'll go straight to the calls. This is from a place, it's a very interesting website called Maplight, Maplight, maplight.com. And you should remember this. What it does is it's an organization that tracks members of Congress, how much money they get from various industries and corporations, and how they vote on issues related to those corporations. In other words, how many people are being bribed, how much money they're getting in bribes, and how they vote when it comes to issues affecting these corporations and rich people that give them the bribes in Congress. By bribe, I mean campaign contributions. On Wednesday, July 4th, the House of Representatives voted to continue the National Security Agency's Dragnet domestic surveillance program. But what happened the other day was, and this is an interesting moment in U.S. political history, people who are libertarians, people who are Republicans who believe in civil liberties and in the first, in the amendments to the Constitution, joined up with Democrats and other liberals to almost put the National Security Agency, that's a National Security Agency, I kept calling it administration, National Security Agency in its place to back them off, to keep them from spying on us. So a man, Representative Justin Amash, who is a Republican of Michigan, introduced an amendment to the 2014 Defense Department Appropriations Act, right, which would have blocked funding for NSA surveillance activities and that are not limited to specific persons of interest. Translated, that means is he was going to tell the NSA, you're not getting money to just tap everybody's phone. You have to go to a lot of trouble to prove, like it says in the Constitution you should, that you're investigating people who really need to be investigated. And he proposed an amendment to the Defense Department Appropriations Act to do this. And listen to this. The amendment was rejected by a vote of 205 to 217. They put it backwards. In other words, by 12 votes, it was defeated. This guy joined up with Republicans and Democrats who believe in our rights under the Constitution to keep our own government from spying on us, and they almost won. This is the first time this has happened in something like, 10 years, maybe since 9/11. As much as 70% of the money appropriated to the NSA by Congress is used to pay private defense companies to conduct intelligence operations, though the details of the NSA's budget and contracts with private companies are classified. In other words, if we want to know where our tax money is going, being spent by the NSA to spy on us, we can't, because it's a secret. In other words, fuck you. You're a voter. You're a taxpayer. Just pay your money and shut up. Federal budget experts estimate the NSA's budget to be somewhere between $10 billion to $20 billion a year. We don't even know why, because it's a secret. It's none of your business. Just give them your tax money and shut up. So this website, MapLight, a MapLight analysis of campaign contributions from employees and PACs of defense contractors and other defense industry interests to current members of the House shows the following. And this is just a typical example. This is what MapLight does. It'll tell you every single congressperson and every single senator, so that'll cover anybody in your state if you're listening, where they got their money from for campaigns, down to the last penny, which is fascinating, right? And what their voting record is like that affects these industries and these people. Representatives voting to continue NSA's Dragnet surveillance programs received, on average, 122% more money from defense contractors and other defense industry interests than did representatives who voted to end the program, the spying program. You see what it's all about? The bottom line. The people in Congress, with only about 5% cut out, about 5% of them are an exception. 95% of the people in Congress, including the president, are corporate stooges. They are prostitutes who are being pimped by corporations. This is where your tax money goes. So one last thing before we go straight to our calls, 866-997-4748. I want to apologize to caller Bob from Tennessee. Last week, Bob called up, and I only let him on for about 2 or 3 minutes. I cut him off. I had a lot of other calls, but I think I was kind of abrupt. Bob, if you're listening, I apologize. You're one of my better callers. Who do we have? John, you're on, John.
Yeah, I was listening to the guy about the border security.
Yeah.
And it occurred, first of all, let me thank you for all this great information that you just gave. It's really important.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, it struck me, the irony of this, of the surveillance and the scrutiny on the borders, and how it's become this huge industry, and there's all this technology that's come into play, and it's tightening the noose around the average citizen. But at the same time, we've got globalization of corporations. There are no borders for them.
That's an interesting point. Yeah.
the everyday guy and gal out there, well, you better stay in your place.
You know, that is a fascinating point. There's borders going up everywhere for us, the regular people, but the global corporations have no borders at all. Interesting.
Yeah. All right, that's all I needed to say. But great job, Mike. Keep it up.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. All the more to illustrate the point that our governments don't represent us anymore. They represent these corporations. Year after year, there's something like the Trans-Pacific Partnership going on now, which is like makes NAFTA look like a little candy store. All of these countries all over the world, which are owned by corporations or that are sort of national monarchies, like the sheikdoms, the Sheikh of Araby, like the Saudi Arabians, and in Dubai and Doha and all of these places, right? And the Chinese government, which is a sovereign corporate state. All of these places are combining, these businesses are combining, and they make deals with each other which go across international boundaries as if they didn't exist. They eliminate the rights of workers. They eliminate our own civil rights because it stands in the way of business. Either, this is what's coming down to, either within the next 10, 20, 30 years, we are going to have one huge, large corporate international security state in which we are all just interchangeable slaves and parts and patrolled by millions of police and surveillance equipment and military, or we are going to take back our governments. It's what a long time ago the socialists and even the communists, the ones who meant well, and I'm not talking about people in Russia, but people who really believed in this, either we're going to have a world that is for the people who live in it, or we're going to have a world for a very small other group of people who want to control every resource we have, water, air, minerals, food, everything, and back it up with armed people who will shoot you down like dogs. The choice is becoming very, very, very clear. It is no longer very complex what's going on. Either it's our world or it's their world. All right, so who do we have? Leon from Washington, you're on. Or I'm sorry, you're trucking in Washington.
Yeah, I'm originally from Iowa. So.
Oh, okay. Did you say trucking? I hope it's trucking.
Yeah.
Yes, so go ahead.
Okay. I guess I go through them border checkpoints all the time, and they're no worry. I mean, they wouldn't be there if they weren't successful in catching drug smugglers and some illegal.
I don't know. They may actually be useful in doing that, but that is not the main reason they're there. The main reason they're there is so that the companies they work for can make lots of money out of our taxes.
I'm more afraid of driving into a scale house than I am driving into them places, but still,
yeah,
you know, we got a drug problem, and it's all over the 50 states, and a lot of them drugs are coming from the south, and they're there to, because there's always somebody who thinks that they're smarter than the last guy, you know.
Let me ask you a question here. We do have an astounding drug problem in this country. It's not just illegal drugs; it's actually prescription drugs, but that's almost a separate thing. And yet it all comes down to the same thing. Why do all these places and all these people take such chances and act in such a dangerous, vicious manner to sell drugs in the United States? Why are people in this country using so many drugs? In other words, they couldn't sell their drugs here unless the whole country was desperately in need of drugs. What is wrong with this country that there's so many drug addicts in it?
I don't have any idea what's wrong with these people that want to use these drugs that are just screw them up in the long run. I mean, they might get by with it the first few times, but when they get addicted, their lives are screwed up. But
you see, the question I'm asking, which is sort of on a larger basis, is businesses can't thrive unless somebody buys the product, right?
That's right.
So why we might be better off concentrating on what's wrong with our country or the way we live here, that people desperately need drugs, rather than just arresting the people who sell the drugs. That's what I'm saying.
I don't have the answer to that. But then on another issue, since I do a little bit of farming in Iowa.
Yeah, go ahead.
After running the Mexican farmers out of business, I wish I had more information on that, because, you know, if it was earlier in the 20 years ago or something, the American farmers, even with subsidies, were going broke.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm hearing some of these small Mexican peasants that probably farm in a 10 or 20 acre plot, and they do it dry land, which means they're probably only raising 30, 40 bushel an acre or whatever they get.
Mm-hmm.
They probably couldn't make it anyway. Yeah.
Well, I guess what the point the guy was making, and I'm not an expert on this either, was that these people were at least getting by until the price of corn from these huge agribusinesses, which are global businesses, so undercut even their meager price that it put them out of business. Now that's something I think that American farmers are familiar with, right? If you're a small independent farmer in this country, your prices get undercut by large agribusinesses, and that could put American farmers out of business too, I think, right? I think we lost. Did we lose it? I hope you're listening anyhow to the response. So we should go to another call. And the issues are, we were talking about abortion earlier. We were talking about this national surveillance stuff, about basically your tax money going to finance wars and surveillance. But what are they protecting? What's going on inside our country? The whole country, half the country's on drugs, prescription drugs or regular drugs. What is wrong with America that so many people in America of every color, of every class, of every group, of every shape, form, and size feels the need to drug themselves? There's more people taking drugs in this country, prescription and otherwise, than relative to any other country on earth. Something is wrong here when people need to drug themselves. Something's going on. You can't just arrest all the Mexican drug dealers. They're just supplying a product to an already established group of people in the United States that need to be drugged. Why do we need to be drugged here? What's wrong with our lives that we need to be high all the time or, drifting away on some drug? It's a good question, right? Who do we have? Bob from North Carolina, you're on.
Hey, Mike, enjoy your show.
Oh, thanks.
I'm the Republican from the William F. Buckley branch.
Oh, okay.
I really enjoy your show. You're exactly right. We have state corporatism in this country now, similar to China, basically, or crony capitalism and rent seekers. That's all we have. And and I agree with you. This thing on gun control and abortion that we have to put up with. But there's no work. There is no work. There's no work that really pays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I mean, even radio broadcasting, you don't get much money for that.
The best social program in the world is a job.
Yeah.
And there's just no work, and we get bread and circuses. Bread, that's all we get.
Well, bread and circuses, and then we do have a job. If we are working, they will take our taxes, out of the checks, and they will fund these corporations which are producing things that aren't doing you and me any good.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I don't know. Anyhow,
I don't know. Every week I listen to your show, and people say, "What can we do?" And it's simple. We just don't go to work. We don't participate anymore.
Just turn our backs on it. But how do we survive while we're doing that?
Well, I know, but they do it. You can have a national strike. I can guarantee if we had a 2-day strike, that would really shake the foundation.
Well, since you bring that up, it's interesting. What worked once before in this country, off and on various times, and I know was very successful because I participated in this from one end of it in the 60s, was boycotts. Worked national and international. A huge boycott, which doesn't take a lot of organizing, just get the word out. If people turn their backs on buying certain products, like, for instance, the Koch brothers, they own Georgia Pacific, right, which produces all sorts of paper products. And not to be too absurd about it, but, like paper towels, toilet paper, whatever it is. If people decided to buy somebody else's stuff en masse and try to put Georgia Pacific out of business, that's making a statement. In other words, vote with your money that's left to you after the taxes.
All they care about is entertainment now. And you talk about, why do we take drugs? If you ever watched that Ken Burns series on Prohibition?
Oh, yeah, that was a great one.
That's the history of the United States. Half the country's tanked.
That's true.
For the last 250 years.
That's true. Right up until the time, one of the reasons why people, and it's good you brought that up, because one of the reasons people, there's something about this country entirely. I don't know what it is, although I have my ideas. But that's a good point that you're making here. Before it was drugs, it was alcohol. The reason that there was prohibition and all those ladies, those severe-looking ladies marching around demanding prohibition.
They didn't pay their bills. They didn't feed their families.
That meant half the men in the country were drunk. Now, but why is that? And I think I have answers for it, but that's a question, right?
Yeah, and now we've supplemented, alcohol with. Now we have both drugs and alcohol.
So let me ask you, what is it about America that causes people to drink themselves into a stupor or to take drugs? What is it? This is the home of the This is the home of the brave and the land of the free. Why is everybody high?
I don't. That's the human condition, Mike.
No, but it happens more here relative to the population.
Maybe it's more amplified in our culture. There's something about the U.S. culture that makes people drink and take drugs more. I don't know.
I wonder I just wonder what that is. I really wonder what that is. I mean, I think that's
like a new phenomenon. That's what's so. I thought it was something new. No, I watched that series and I said, Gabe, they've been drunk since 1776.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up because it's true. There is a history to this. People, what they should do is, if you get a chance and you have Netflix or you get a chance to get these DVDs rather, it's called Prohibition, and it's a series by Ken Burns, and it's really eye-opening.
Yes,
yeah.
I opened my eyes. I thought, again, it was just shocking to know that the country had such a, people think that that drugs are such a big problem. It was a problem in the 19th century with alcohol.
Well, here, what's a perfect example which may supply part of the answer here is Theodore Roosevelt. His first important job in the world was the police commissioner of New York City. Right? And a lot of people don't know that. But Theodore Roosevelt, who was born rich, who lived in a mansion out on Long Island, of course, and commuted to the city a lot. And when he's in the city, he lived in this big, fancy brownstone like the Mayor Bloomberg does right now. So he was rich, and he belonged to rich clubs and rich other places, right? And in these clubs, although there were prohibition laws here and there, and people had restrictions against drinking, especially on Sunday, if you were rich in New York City in 1892 or whenever it was, or 1883, whenever he was the police commissioner, you could go there on Sunday to these private clubs because you were rich, and there were no rules. You could have drinks or you could get drunk. But regular places, they're all shut down on Sunday. So Theodore Roosevelt becomes police commissioner of New York. Half the city is drunk, but half the city is so poor they hardly have enough money. They have to work 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, just to supply food for their families. And when they get a break, what do they want to do? They've got 6 kids at home. They're grimy, they're miserable, they're broken down by this work they do. They get paid nothing. They want to have a goddamn drink to relax. Theodore Roosevelt comes in and starts to close down all the bars, right? And meanwhile, he's uptown drinking in his private club or going out and having cocktails on Long Island in his mansion. There's the problem. They're drunk because of people like him.
Well, exactly. He got police commissioner because his thing was he was going to clean up the city, basically.
Well, he meant well in some cases. Prostitutes and drunks everywhere and corrupt police, and he really tried to do the right thing. But what he didn't understand was one of the reasons why things were the way they were then and they're the way they are now is because of this vast income inequality.
Well, he did start that the New Deal, not the New Deal, but the Great Deal or the Square Deal. That was his
Square Deal, yeah. No, he was a decent guy and he meant well, but he didn't understand what it meant to be so rich when so many people were so poor, and we still have that problem.
That brought on the progressive era in the early 20th century, and I think we're in kind of a gilded age right now, basically. I mean, if you really know anything about this history of this country, you've got to say that we're in a gilded age. Right?
Oh, that's true, right? That's absolutely true. Listen, you know what? I've got some other people lined up.
I know, but I enjoy your show, and not all of us on the right are insane. Okay.
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 I'll take your word for it.
All right, I appreciate it.
Would you lie to me?
No, sir. No, I really like your show. I just want to know that some of it can see the truth. Through all the bullshit, we see the truth.
I think there's a place, and it's a decent place, where the left and the right join up. I agree.
All right.
Thanks. Do we have calls? You know what? Let's take a break. We didn't take a break, right? Okay, everybody who's on the line, hang on by your thumbs or whatever, and we'll be with you right after this break. Don't hang up. Other people, if you want to join those people, you can call up during the break, and we'll get to all your calls. I will actually attempt to try to cut down on my sermons so that we can take... No. What, are you betting against it now? I thought you weren't betting. All right, let's take a break. Progress. Let's progress to a phone call. Abdul, my old pal. Go ahead.
Hey, Mike.
Hey.
That's thing you bring up national security because you remember last week President Obama talking about Trayvon could have been me 35 years ago, being profiled. And it was a good message that I can identify personally because I know what it's like being profiled at 17.
Right.
And that was fine. But exactly enough, in the same week, as Janet Napolitano,
right,
she's calling her career, and it turns out one of the names being thrown out, trying to replace her, is that New York Commissioner Kelly.
Ray Kelly. Yeah. Janet, no, it's actually we're having trouble hearing you. So what? I'll have to translate. What Abdul is saying is that President Obama made that speech the other day. He said 30 years ago he could have been Trayvon. He could have been profiled and he could have been killed. And Janet Napolitano was the head of Homeland Security. Is retiring to become the head of the University of California. So I guess she's going to be pepper spraying the people there anyhow instead of, whatever. And who he's thinking of appointing is, or a possible candidate is Ray Kelly, who's the mayor of New York, who is famous for profiling.
Yep, that's his big ticket of fame was stop and frisk. And then, it's like, what's the phrase, I guess?
I hate to do this, but because I love hearing from you, but your call is breaking up so bad that it's beginning to sound just like a box of Cracker Jacks. If you can call us back, I'd be glad to take your call. Okay. Who do we have? Matt in Michigan. You're on.
Yeah, hi, Mike.
Hey.
It's the first time I've gotten to talk to you since you become part of the Revolutionary Progress channel.
Yes, I'm part of the progress. I'm not part of the problem. I'm part of the progress.
Yeah, you're no longer just a radio host. You're part of a corporate-driven.
No. I'm part of the progressive movement now. So what did you have to say?
Anyway, the security fence, I honestly think that the bright people in the right wing, not the rabid racists like Representative King, and the oligarchs that more or less run the country, they really see the future. And we're not looking at this whole security craze and the need for walls and fences and all this properly. I don't believe in the future, these walls, they're not designed to keep people out. The fact of the matter is, immigration to this country, because the economy is crappy, is down. More people are leaving this country than coming here. I think the future is the walls are intended to keep people in. That's what the future is. And I firmly believe that capitalism is the highest form of, or slavery is the highest form of capitalism, and they see the future. Remember Tom DeLay came back from the Marianas Islands in 1996? And he talked about how the Marianas Islands, where actual chattel slavery was practiced and probably still is, he was talking about how this is a model for capitalism in the future. And I think he's dead on. The opportunity is declining. People are becoming desperate, and people are going to want to get out of here.
And go where? And go where?
Well, for the time being, Latin America's actually experienced a lot more growth than we have, as desperate as they are, and they're trying to move in the opposite direction.
So wait, you're saying they're building all these walls to keep Americans from leaving?
I think that's what they see down the line, honestly. Or they certainly would take advantage of that in a situation like that.
Well, maybe. I don't know. But actually, there's one thing I could agree with you on, is that you see now Charles Koch and all these other people are spending hundreds of millions of dollars, which is pretty ironic to begin with, to get rid of the minimum wage. They want to get rid of the minimum wage, which is already so low that people can't even live on it. They can't even survive on it. And what could be better if you extend this capitalistic idea of getting rid of the reason he wants to get rid of the minimum wage is it's a capitalistic idea. You get rid of the minimum wage, then people will work for nothing and businesses will thrive. Well, of course, the people who own the businesses will thrive because they have to pay nothing to their workers. Why not go all the way with it and reinstitute slavery? That's what made a lot of people down south very rich. And talk about no minimum wage, it's called slavery.
No, I honestly think that's this is the direction we're headed in. And, occasionally they almost, various representatives, when they sort of lose control of themselves and say something about bringing back property qualifications in some form or these restrictions on voting, they're sort of showing their hand. And I really believe that's the potential future. And there's been this idea, neoliberal idea, that, capitalism is going to help out everyone. And that just hasn't been the case. And if you own everything, you don't honestly need any more money. I mean, what might be more important to you is power. How much more money do the Kochs possibly need? They don't need any money, and their family doesn't need any money for probably, God knows how many generations. So why not take it all the way and basically bring back, the feudal era where you have not just all the economic power, but you have all the political power, the entire system. And that's within their grasp now.
I think real cynical people like the Kochs, they see that. Mm-hmm. And also, what could be better if you're intending to impose a kind of corporate slave state on people than to have an already beefed up, weaponized national police force called Homeland Security? It all fits.
It'll be indispensable.
Well, I don't know. I mean, really, who knows? It may actually be, but it sure looks like it's headed that way.
We have already got that with the incarcerated population. I mean, I'm sure you've read some of these articles about the massive numbers of corporations that are taking advantage of the huge incarcerated population, and they're firing people that they were hiring, like telemarketers that they used to use overseas. Mm-hmm. Now they're getting all kinds of prisoners. There's been these are big companies like AT&T, major corporations that the top 100, 500 corporations are taking advantage of these incarcerated prisoners that are like 50 or 75 cents a day. This is a real thing. And for agriculture, too, that was one of the things that helped out. The racists got out of control down in Georgia and decided to kick all the brown people out. Prisoners were who they turned to, Mike. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, what are prisoners?
So basically, we're going all the way back to chain gangs where they work for local businesses and they rent it out by people. Did you ever see, what's that, the Shawshank Redemption?
Let me ask you something, and I'll hang up.
Yeah.
When wages are so crappy, and everyone knows this universally from top to bottom, that's not disputed at this point, mm-hmm. What's the end game then? I mean, they're already lousy. Things are already lousy for people, and yet you're at the top, and you're trying to make things worse. Tell me what the end game is if it is an outright chattel slavery. And I'll say goodnight to you, Mike.
Well, that's a rhetorical question. The end game from the other direction is pure and utter revolution. When this happened in France and Russia and other places in history in this world at various times, when people got so out of control on the top end and owned everything and everybody else was starving, then you had armed revolution. Is that what we're headed for in this country? We have a democracy. Maybe we could head that off and do the right thing. I don't know. So who do we have? Chris in Texas, you're on the line.
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Okay.
Good. Hey, listen, you had piqued my interest when I heard your show. First of all, I like your show.
Thank you.
When you talked about both parties, Democrat and Republican parties, both being in bed together, and it expressed a sentiment that I've always believed, and I've never heard others articulate until I heard you mention it. Mm-hmm. One good example of this that was Bob Dole, and by the way, I like Bob Dole, but I want to give him as a good example. The guy goes to Congress. He goes to Congress. He's worth maybe a couple of $100,000. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Back in the time, you could get elected that way. But he leaves Congress worth a multi-millionaire. How do you explain this to me? How do you end up being a multi-millionaire? And I do mean like something to the tune of, I want to say 60 mil. And it wasn't his wife, by the way. And on a $150,000 average salary that he made over the years that he was a senator. That is incredible to me, and that's what got me into thinking. Mm-hmm. And so when you made mention of it on your show, I said, man, this guy's got it, And then the second point I wanted to make, if I can give this quick analogy, what's going on in this country, and in fact, I believe it was Eisenhower that said it best, but I'm gonna put it a different way. I'm gonna use gun smoke. Mm-hmm. What's happening is Dodge City. Picture Dodge City on a cold night, and the wind is blowing and the tumbleweed is just going through the streets of Dodge City, mm-hmm. and everybody's congregated in Kitty's Saloon. They're arguing and they're arguing over gays and lesbians, gays and homosexuality. They're arguing over all guns and all of the things that we argue about, right? And down the street in Dodge, while we are in the saloon arguing over all of these issues, race issues, you got the insurance companies, the defense companies, the defense contractors, all of these people, insurance companies, on and on, down at the bank stealing from this country while we are distracted with all of these distractions, you know? And it's going on every day, man. And then finally, my last point, if I could just make real quick, and that point has to be the fact that I don't think, and you may disagree, and I think you do, I don't think Obama is a part of that. I really don't. And I'll tell you why. Just look at a man's character, how he come up. You know what I mean? He could have went into a million things as smart as he was, but I think the guy is genuinely trying to help people, you know. I really do. The only thing he disappointed me on, which brings him back to your point in corporatism, is when he didn't go for Medicare for all. And then I knew again, the protection for the insurance companies, you know? And so, I don't know the answer. And I wish you would tell me what you think the answer is, getting away from this Republican, Democrat. But the biggest thing is uniting the left and the right together to fight what is going on in this country, man.
Yeah. No, I've laid this out before, but there's alternatives. A government, if you go look at the Declaration of Independence, the government is supposed to represent the interests of the people. It's supposed to promote the interests of the people, and it doesn't anymore. So you have, and the reason I bring up the Declaration of Independence is because they said when a government doesn't do that anymore, then the people who live in that country have the right to abolish that government. So we're talking about revolution. We always have the right, according to our own founders, to get rid of our government and start all over again. That's one thing. And I'm not talking about being a revolutionary or killing people. I'm merely quoting the founders of this country. Secondly, we have civil disobedience, mass boycotts. We can run candidates against the against the Democrats in primaries, real people who represent, all of us. There are various alternatives to do this. But unless people pull themselves away from their devices and their cell phones and their texting and their sexting and their TVs, we're done for. We're done for, you know.
Well, the worst thing that happened with Reagan when he did away with the fairness and the media is terrible, man. And that's the problem. They went after the media under Reagan. They went after the media, and this thing of fairness is gone. You know, this is why the progressive, like your talk, progressive talk cannot make it. They can't make it because they could stack against any progressive movement because of the way the media, even itself, is structured now. There's no intelligence in the media. They do not ask questions. They get people who are not qualified to give commentary day after day. That's all you hear. There's no way the truth can get out.
No, it's true. If we get our education from what we listen to in major media, then obviously we're as stupid as we appear to be. Yeah, I'm getting a signal from the engineer that we have a couple more calls to go to.
Hey, thanks, man. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Democrats, Republicans, tell me the difference. I don't see it at the national level. Go ahead. George in Pennsylvania, you are on the radio.
Hi, Mike. How are you? Hey. If you look at history as an iterative process, I think what you're looking back through history is that, the royals of Britain didn't get it right. The monarchs of France didn't get it right. But we just have successive generations of oligarchs who are trying to whittle it down and get it to the point where they can really control the population in the manner that they wish to. And I think here in the United States of America in the year 2013, we might be close to them perfecting their process, right? They've got us all distracted with social issues that really don't mean anything to our day-to-day lives, but which the voting populace will go tooth and nail, right? Gays getting married doesn't have an effect on anybody, but they'll vote for somebody who does not represent their best interest simply for the fact that they represent the quote-unquote correct side of any given social issue. They've got us, you talk about drugs, I don't really care about the guy drinking a six-pack on a Saturday night or smoking a joint, but we have a population that's largely doped up on pharmaceutical mood enhancers. We have, as your last caller demonstrated, a guy who doesn't recognize that the current president is just as much a tool of the corporate rulers that anybody else has ever been. And it could be that we've gotten down to the point where there will be no revolution. There will be nothing but acquiescence to the ruling class and what the ruling class wants.
It does appear as if, they called it, when they talk about the tipping point in climate change, and, I think scientists are trying to be cheerleaders because a lot of them know that we have actually passed the tipping point. I don't want to be Mr. Gloom and Doom, but they talk about if we do this or if we do that or we develop the tar sands, we will pass the tipping point and the earth will just basically fry us all, right? The climate. We have passed the tipping point, so who knows what's going to happen. But there are other kinds of tipping points, and I believe in the United States of America, we may have passed the tipping point of passivity where it's impossible to mobilize enough citizens anymore to actually retake the government. We may have passed the point where it's possible.
Yeah, with the security state that we have in place and the militarization of local police forces, I just don't think it can be done.
So it's like it's like Brave New World, and Aldous Huxley wrote all about this in the 50s. Basically everybody takes Soma, which the guy was a genius. He was prophetic. Basically everybody's taking prescription drugs. He called it Soma, which was like Prozac. And we watch the movies, which were called feelies, because when you put your hands, this isn't a novel, Brave New World, put your hands down on the armrests when you're in the movies, they had you hooked up to electrodes so that if there was sex or violence on the screen, you could feel the same feelings that the people were feeling in the movie, right? And then everybody was taking Soma, and everybody was bred in laboratories to be either an A personality, B, C, D, workers, bosses, whatever it was. How far away are we from that? That was considered to be science fiction, no more.
Well, when you consider what some of those guys wrote about, it's really amazing with the prescience that they had and the predictions that they made. And I'll just leave you with this thought. George Orwell, I think, said it best. If you want to know the future of mankind, picture a boot stomping on a human face forever.
Yeah, well, people should read more Orwell. Orwell was one of the best prophetic and actually very good political and cultural writers that there ever was. I mean, his essays and his discussions of literature, Orwell is about as good as it gets. So thanks for calling.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay, what do we have? Jane? James from Arizona.
James?
Yeah.
Hello?
Yeah, James, you're on. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, I called earlier, and you were talking about who would vote for those politicians who would do abortion. Well, I'm one of those individuals who voted for politicians like that.
Mm-hmm.
Because, number one, if a woman can't decide outside of something horrific, medically horrific, if she can't decide if she's going to have a baby after 20 weeks, what's the point? She's known she was pregnant for 5 weeks. What's wrong with, for 5 months, what's wrong with limiting abortions to 5 months or less?
So, I'm sorry, so your basic point is what?
That most of these laws are not, all they're doing is limiting the time someone can be, when they can have an abortion, not limiting the abortions. You can't limit someone having an abortion, but you can limit the time they can have an abortion.
So why is it a state legislature's business to tell a woman what to do with her body?
Mainly because once she has that child, if she government assistance.
I'm sorry, what?
She can go on government assistance.
No, but they've cut, and they are in the process of cutting all government assistance. The same exact people who are coming up with these anti-abortion laws also want small government where they don't provide assistance to people.
Then that means the person would have to figure out, hey, can I afford this child?
And a lot of people, that's exactly the point. So a lot of people say to themselves, there's no jobs, there's no government safety net. I can't afford this child. I
barely hear you.
These people are saying there's no jobs, there's no government assistance. I can't afford this child. The only decent, reasonable thing to do is have an abortion. But now they're saying, no, you can't have an abortion. He's gone. Okay, sorry, you faded out. I was trying to give you your answer. We could take one more call. We have no more calls, so we can't take that call. You can't take nothing. This is my Zen comment for the night. You cannot take nothing. You have to take something. Are you getting that? You can't take nothing.